and prohibit the use in all zones. At this hearing, any person who believes that his or her interest is affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given the opportunity to be heard on matters contained in the bylaw. No one should feel discouraged to speak, nor will any person be prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that all who speak at this hearing restrict their remarks to matters contained in the bylaw. It is my responsibility as chair of this meeting to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. Those who wish to speak concerning the proposed bylaw should address council by clearly stating their name and physical address, and thereafter proceed to provide their views concerning the proposed bylaw. Members of council may, if they so wish, ask questions following your presentation. Please note that the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. Please remember that it is not the function of council at this hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens or with each other. Regardless of whether you favor or oppose a particular application or argument, please refrain from applause or other expressions of emotion, as these will not be tolerated. Restraint enables all views expressed to be heard in as impartial a forum as possible. Thank you for your patience and cooperation, and now let's proceed with the hearing. So I have a list of names of people who have asked to speak this evening, and I will call you by name. If at the end of the speakers list there are more people who wish to speak, I will be calling for extra speakers, so if you didn't get your name on the list, please don't worry about that. You will have an opportunity. Our first speaker, oh, pardon me, sorry. Oh, sorry about that. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to back up. So the statement of the chair. So the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that we have completed the statutory advertising for this public hearing. And I'm sorry, folks. We're going to begin with the staff presentation first. So I would like to turn this over to staff.
So I'll just start just to give a bit of a background of why this is before council at this time. So the proposed zoning change is seen by staff as an interim measure to give council and the community an opportunity to put in appropriate zoning regulation once they know how the federal and provincial governments intend to regulate the marijuana industry. The proposed zoning change is to not allow marijuana businesses in any zones of the city at this time. This will do two things. A, create a level playing field. Those that have jumped the gun will not have an advantage over those that have waited until marijuana has been made legal by the federal government. And B, it will allow council to put in proper regulation scheme once they know how the federal and provincial governments will regulate the industry. So in terms of the point of creating a level playing field, if council change the zoning bylaw to restrict marijuana businesses in the city before the federal legislation passes that makes them legal, then current operators could be allowed to continue to operate even if council changes the zoning in the future. They could become legally non-conforming. This could even result in a current operator not being allowed to hold a license in the future, say they had a criminal record, but they may be able to sell their current location at a windfall to someone that acquires a license. It is also difficult to put in local regulations without knowing how those senior levels of government will regulate the industry. For example, senior levels of government may restrict the number of licenses that are allowed in the community. They may require that they be located at certain distances from schools, youth centers, recreation centers, etc. They may impose certain security requirements like fencing, lighting, security bars on doors and windows, etc. Enforcement might fall under provincial or federal inspectors who may be in each community, or they may be at a regional level. All of the above could have an impact on how local government might regulate the industry. Local governments are hoping to have more information this fall when the federal task force reports out, but it won't be until the legislation passes that local governments will have certainty over the federal legislation. This is proposed in the spring of 2017. Once the federal and provincial legislation is passed, then councils will be in a position to engage their community on what regulations should be put in place at the local level. This will likely require further zoning changes, and this will trigger another public hearing at that time. Council does have the ability to start that consultation whenever they choose so. In terms of the current medical marijuana dispensaries, they are currently offside council's business license and bylaw and are illegal. Council at this time has the right to close those at any time. If the proposed zoning bylaw amendments pass, then council would also be able to close these under the zoning bylaw if they choose. As in the current case, it will be up to council to determine the level of enforcement that it chooses to implement regarding medical marijuana dispensaries. So basically, this will give an additional tool, but it doesn't change the current situation. That council has the right to enforce, fine, or close if they so choose. And ultimately, that will be council's decision in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Cormack. Ms. Squires?
Just an update on letters received. So council has received all of the letters, email correspondence that was submitted to Development Services. We received a total of 7 letters and or emails. Number in favor at this point is, in favor of the amendments is 0. The number opposed to the amendments is 6, and 1 was unclear.
Thank you. All good? All right. We'll begin with hearing from people. Our first speaker is Mr. Herb Couch. Would you step forward, please? Couch is from Nelson.
Will there be a chair provided for us?
Could you bring yours with you? Thank you.
Next meeting, we're bringing our own chair.
Lazy boys.
Nelson City Council and staff. My name is Herb Couch. I live in Nelson, BC at 510 Houston Street. I'm also the Sensible BC contact person for this area. I'm speaking tonight to urge you to not pass third reading of the proposed zoning amendments marijuana operations bylaw. The proposed bylaw would, quote, define marijuana operations and to prohibit them in all land use zones throughout the city, unquote. This is an awful and disappointing bylaw proposal. If this bylaw is adopted, there can be only 2 possible outcomes. 1, the bylaw will be ignored in practice. That would mean it would be a useless bylaw and not helpful. Or 2, the bylaw will be enforced. That would mean that many medical cannabis users would suffer, and the bylaw would create a tremendous amount of conflict in our community. Both of these outcomes are terrible. This zoning amendments marijuana operations bylaw proposal is the wrong way to go. It should not be adopted. I realize that Nelson City Council finds itself in a challenging situation. However, the coming legalization of cannabis should be seen as providing opportunities for Nelson. First, Nelson City Council should create sensible regulations for our local compassion clubs, dispensaries, and businesses. Instead of a total ban on all marijuana operations, Nelson can put in place bylaws to regulate and license dispensaries, just like Vancouver, Victoria, Port Alberni, Nanaimo, Kimberley, Rossland, and many other towns have done. An outright ban on all marijuana operations is an outdated approach. It will not solve any of Nelson City Council's concerns. It only means that Nelson City Council has no control of the present situation. It's time for Nelson City Council to work together with local cannabis, compassion clubs, dispensaries, and businesses for the betterment of our city. Second, Nelson City Council needs to support local jobs in our local cannabis economy. Cannabis is a large part of Nelson's economy. The proposed bylaw with a total ban on marijuana operations in Nelson would harm our local economy. It would only help the black market to stay alive. The proposed bylaw also sends the wrong message to our government in Ottawa. We should not ban our local legal craft marijuana cannabis industry. Starting right now, Nelson City Council should support the production and buying of local cannabis products and not force our citizens to buy cannabis products from other areas of Canada in the future. I would like to read a couple of paragraphs from a recent newspaper article called Growing Opportunities by Nick Eagland in the National Post, where our local MLA, Michelle Mungal, talks about the importance of our local craft cannabis industry. The article said, Michelle Mungal, the MLA for Nelson Creston, doesn't deny the role that cannabis plays in her riding. Quote, the type of industry that's growing under the black market is very much a craft industry. So if we lose that craft industry, the big question for us is, what will be the outcome on our local economy? Everyone predicts that it will be negative, she said. Mungal draws similarities between the cannabis and brewing industries, with room and demand for large-scale brewers such as Molson, but also space for local micro brewers such as the Nelson Brewing Company. She believes cannabis users should be able to choose local craft cannabis. Quote, all of these brewers have a particular market and are doing quite well. They generate revenue for government, they generate jobs, they contribute to a local economy, and there should be no reason why marijuana is treated any differently. Nelson City Council should echo her comments. In conclusion, please do not adopt the marijuana operations bylaw. Find a better way to deal with cannabis. Don't let Nelson get left behind. We don't need to sit around and wait for a year or two until the Liberals finally figure out what they're going to do. That won't help us at all. Banning marijuana operations will be very problematic. Sensible regulations are good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Granting this,
Applauding.
for you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you to refrain from applauding, that would be very good. And I'm also going to ask, we have a fairly long list of speakers, and so that we have time for everybody to speak, can I, if you could, approximately 2 to 3 minutes to state your case, that would be great. Our next speaker is Lisa Rozantsov, and Lisa is from Nelson.
I'm Lisa Rozantsov. I live at 1322 Josephine Street, Nelson. This is my daughter Gemma, and she's let me speak on her behalf. I never thought that my daughter would be on the front page of the Nelson Star about cannabis. I wanted to stress that this is all about medicinal cannabis, and in our sense, it's cannabidiol, CBD. She does not get high, nor does she smoke it. She consumes it as an oil, and it's the amount that she needs. That's not like going to a candy store to buy a fun product. She needs huge amounts of CBD to control her seizures. Gemma was born with a neurological disorder which has caused her to have intractable seizures, thousands of them in her 20 years. She's been on 18 different medications, some failing due to unbearable side effects, others that she became too tolerant of. She's been on the ketogenic diet, has had alternate therapies, brain surgery, all in an attempt to improve her quality of life. It has been a roller coaster ride. Let me say that Gemma's story is one about resilience and hope. Despite her medical chronology, she's had an incredible sense of humor. She has a life of adventure and of extreme possibility. This community has band-aided around us from the beginning. Her sense of self has developed in part because of the trust and caring of many who have embraced her and she in return. 3.5 years ago, we were fortunate fortunate enough to have believed the stories of kids who have been helped by CBD. Skeptic at first, we found a local expert, Jim, who helped us on our journey. The world of medicinal cannabis is so vast and confusing to the layperson that we have invested our hope and savings into improving Gemma's life and her health stability. To date, CBD has now proven to be the most effective alternative.
We're at 2 minutes.
Okay. We've reached out to Colorado for Charlotte's Web, the most renowned and available source after 8 months of success, and in March, Health Canada banned it from crossing the border. It's only a hemp product. It has no THC, but is seen as a controlled substance. For those of us caring for ill, chronic pain, or people with needs, we rely on our community professionals to help navigate the way. In all of our experiences, each of the local providers took the time to hear our history, listen to our concerns, and created a team strategy which has developed and changed as new information and products have become available. We have not found our magic bullet, but we will always continue to have hope for a healthier future for Gemma. We feel like the community is in need of a comprehensive group of many dispensaries that have the expertise and the knowledge that are continuing to develop, and the research that is world renowned and is developing on each and every day. That's our story. We just appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Thank you, Gemma. Our next speaker is Nancy Rosenblum.
Hi, everybody. First, I'd like to invite especially Deb and all the counselors to visit each of the dispensaries, because they're all really different and all serve a wide variety of people. I'm always shocked because of my hippie days and stereotypes, I always think I'm going to see, like, hippies and stereotypes, and I'm always surprised when I see people usually like my age and 60 and 70 and 80 using the dispensaries. My particular reason is I've had insomnia for, I don't know, I stopped counting actually, but many, many years, and I was taking Ambien, which is a narcotic, and started using indica-based marijuana and stopped taking Ambien. And really, if the dispensary's closed, I don't know what I would do. I mean, that's kind of why I'm nervous in talking to you, because I would basically go to the dispensaries, stock up on as much as I could before they all closed, and it's really awful to wake up from an Ambien-induced sleep, even though I just take like half. I'm really glad to be off that. I also use this stuff called Buddha Butter, which is a topical, which has no for my, I have restless knee and I take magnesium and all that, but I have not been able to stop my legs from hurting when I go to bed, except by putting this topical on them, and it worked. I've tried Aspercream, I've tried Arnica, I've tried drugs, over-the-counter drugs, and this works. So that's the other product that I would be stocking up on. If if you close, please don't, because I need, it's all. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for listening. You catch my drift.
Our next speaker is Paul De Felice. Is it
Yes,
De Felice?
that's the Italian way. I say De Felice,
De Felice, thank you.
anglicized, yeah. I'm poorly prepared. I forgot my notes, but I am Paul De Felice. I live in Proctor, so I'm not technically in the municipality, but I've invested a lot of time and energy into Nelson and the cannabis issue, as a lot of people would know. And I was kind of shocked when I saw this bylaw being proposed, or these amendments. I thought Nelson was more welcoming, and it seems to me it's things like dispensaries and anything to do with cultivation and accessories. It's a really good fit with Nelson. Like, we've got the population, tourists who come here looking for these kind of things. It just seems insane to close the door on that sort of thing. It's not like Nelson has too many jobs or, you know, a lot of economic opportunities. There's, like, cannabis is the main industry here. It's supported Nelson for decades, and it still will, no matter what kind of barriers people try to put up. And so I want to start by saying, first of all, the name marijuana, like, really, this day and age, like, you got to know that's an old propaganda racist term that it just degrades to even hear it. And I wish we could enter the modern age and use the word cannabis and not sound so backwards, for one thing. Another thing is a lot of this, these barriers come out of fear, and the fear comes from ignorance, I think. And if you know, if you look at the science, there's nothing to be afraid of with cannabis. It's been nothing but useful and helpful, and the problems with it are so minor, especially when you compare it to tobacco or alcohol, that we got to get past this reefer madness and realize it's good medicine, it's a good business, we should welcome it. And I also wanted to say that I've been in touch with legal advice, and I'm told that this will be challenged in court, and it'll end up in Supreme Court, and the lawyer I've spoken to is pretty confident it will not survive. So if you're thinking you're saving time or money or trouble by passing something like this, I can guarantee you you're not. You're opening a can of worms, and it's going to cost taxpayers, like, not just in losing their compassion clubs, but you know, extra court fees that should go for better things. What else do I want to say? Oh yeah, I'm also worried about the overly broad wording that, like, saying all marijuana and all its derivatives, like, that covers hemp seed food. Like, that's just insane. So you're saying still legal would be illegal, the co-op and all its foods would be illegal. That's just insane. So that wording is just, you know, way too broad, and I think that'll end up being its doom when it gets in court.
We're just past 3 minutes.
Okay, well, you know what,
I don't want to rush you too much, but I want to make sure everybody has a chance to speak.
that's good. I think I've said everything I need to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And next is Mr. Alan Middlemas, and he's from Caslo.
Hello, I'm Alan Middlemas, and Paul and I started Holy Smoke Culture Shop 20 years ago to the day, pretty much, and I guess it would be banned now. We wouldn't be able to do that now with the current bylaw. I'm really disappointed in the wording of this bylaw. I think it's what I would call a ruse to say that this bylaw is to prevent future dispensaries. It's really bothers me that in the wording it actually bans any and all cannabis businesses having anything to do with any part of the cannabis plant or a derivative. Anything of the growing of it, the storing of it, the processing, that could be any product. And to say in the name of banning dispensaries, because as everyone knows, Nelson has 7 or 8 dispensaries already. What I see this as is an industry killer, a job killer. I see it as a really ill-advised bylaw that is a blanket statement against all cannabis operations in the name of dispensaries. And as we know, cannabis is about to be legal, and anyone I've talked to, their jaw's on the floor how it's possible Nelson City Council could even consider banning every single marijuana business having anything to do with cannabis at this time. The advertising of anything to do with cannabis being in contravention of the bylaw, I find that really disturbing. The trading, selling, distributing, storing, packaging, growing, cultivating. I'm not sure what the difference between growing and cultivating is, but it's such a blanket statement that it goes so far beyond banning dispensaries that it actually is going to cost Nelson a huge amount of money, in businesses that are now afraid to come to Nelson But I hope that those businesses will locate in cannabis-friendly areas like the Slocan Valley, the Junction, Caslow, Balfour. And just because Nelson is not interested in cannabis economy and cannabis businesses doesn't mean these other areas aren't. And the other thing is, I make a prediction right now that the city council of Nelson will be in the media asking for its fair share of marijuana tax money, but at the same time banning all businesses to do with cannabis. So you just think about that for a second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Our next speaker is Mr. Jim Leslie from Christina Lake.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. My name is Jim Leslie. I reside at 2056 Massey Road, Christina Lake. I am one of the directors of the Kootenays Medicine Tree. I am representing one of the dispensaries here in Nelson. We opened our doors in 2015, and since then there have been a few other dispensaries that have also opened their doors. But what I really want to focus on today is to just talk about what we do. Now, we're not adult access cannabis stores for the healthy, which is what's coming under the Liberals' policy, legalization, quote unquote. We are here to serve the medical needs of affirmed medical patients. So those are two different levels entirely. One is for recreational use, and one is for very serious medical use. So this is in addressing chronic and terminal conditions. Now, the issue that our dispensary has with this bylaw, and I'm urging council not to pass it, but we have a plan. I'd like to share it with you if you'd like. Now, we're suggesting that the bylaw go back for consideration because we need to talk about the realities of economics. Now, this region, of course, has always benefited from money made from the growing and distribution of cannabis. More specifically medical cannabis recently with the growth of these dispensaries. Now, all of us employ local citizens of Nelson and the region in our businesses, to my knowledge. Certainly we do. We're looking at offering extended health benefits to our staff now. We contribute to the local economy, and we have a very close-knit working relationship with licensed and practicing physicians whom we give tours to in our dispensary. We help answer their questions. We serve a community need much more than just access, education as well. So the issues that we have are, if this bylaw passes as it is worded, I agree with the prior presenters that the wording is far too general. In a time where you're looking to give local small and medium business advantage in the cannabis economy as it sits now, and in the economy as it is coming under the Liberals, whatever it will look like, this is not the time to dismiss cannabis businesses who are already entrenched in the community, doing good work, paying taxes, and paying wages. We need a way so that we have a guarantee, as already doing business in this city, that we can find a method to stay open and viable, to help serve the needs of people like Gemma Rozansoff, who depend on our services. Now, to be very specific, if the bylaw is passed and the amendment is passed, and the city has the potential to wipe all the cannabis businesses off the map if they so choose, as they can now, so that may not change. But my problem is there's a length of time here so that you're going to wait until the federal government comes out with its ultimate policy before you then undertake a study of proper land zone use and so forth, and what type of businesses will be permitted where. This is going to really handicap all of us in a sense and put us behind the times. Vancouver, Kimberley, Victoria, all these other municipalities are finding ways to allow viable, legitimate, medical-based cannabis businesses to flourish while controlling their proliferation, making sure they're good actors. Now, if the actual...
Mr. Leslie, can you
Absolutely. So, One concern I have specifically, and this comes down to constitutional rights, it was already addressed earlier. There is a legitimate constitutional right under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to access cannabis medicine. Now, this report, which is from Lidstone and Associates in Vancouver, this is at the back of the bylaw, it talks about the fact that there must be no undue state of interference with Canadians who are accessing cannabis rightfully. Now, this also applies to local government bylaws, as it's noted in the report. Now, it's really important to state here that when we're looking at people's ability to access this, they have a constitutional right that has been decided and verified in every major court case we have won to date, and there are many of them. So my fear is you're putting yourselves potentially at risk from patients who would find their access cut off if indeed this was passed and council decided to clear the slate, so to speak, and allow even and equal participation after the Liberals have decided, which they say they're going to table the new regulations next year. They may not be in effect until years after. So right now the reality on the ground is, in order to shore up the local economy, protect the jobs that are already here in the medical cannabis business that is already ongoing, we need a process. Now, it might not be a business license, but what about to strike a working group amongst all the stakeholders in the room here tonight, and some who are not, including medical professionals, mayor and council, cannabis dispensers, law enforcement, and we can look at coming up with ways to allow maybe a cannabis-based operating permit. There's got to be some sort of paper or some sort of process where council can feel that you have some measure of knowledge and control over who is coming in here to do business, but you do not take us all out at the knees. Because what is growing right here, if you can't see it right now, is a very powerful, potent, important cannabis economy. One thing that our company is doing is we are...
Mr. Leslie, I think you're at 5 minutes.
Sure. You know what, 30 seconds, I'll be done. I'm just going to say that we are buying our products exclusively, our dried flower cannabis, from local producers. We are streamlining them into testing, into pesticide residue testing, microbe screening. We want them to join us in the new cannabis economy. And I think Nelson City Council can help us do that without using a bylaw like this that would really do more harm than good at the end of the day, not just to patients, but to the economic future of this region.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much.
Please refrain from applause.
Why is
There's,
it?
can I,
Why is it? Why do you want to second the motion?
If you missed the beginning opening statement, public hearings are really very formal affairs
Why?
because it's legislated. If this was a public meeting, like an open house, it would be a very different type of meeting. But public hearings are very formal occasions where
Let's just keep
people
going.
present.
Let's just keep going.
Hold it. I'm just explaining to you what's going on. And when people are speaking, sometimes people are intimidated if people are showing applause or booing or anything like that. A public hearing is a time and place where everyone's voice is to be heard, and it as a calm atmosphere as possible. It doesn't mean that you can't feel passionate about what you're speaking about, but that's why we ask people to refrain from applause or cheering or any of that. So thank you for asking, and we'll move on to the next speaker.
may I, for your consideration, Council, leave the 2006 community-based guidelines for medical cannabis distribution, just so you see how we're actually operating? Food for thought.
You're welcome to leave that here. Yes, thank
Perfect.
you very much.
Thank you.
We now have Mr. Alon Gelser, and he is from Nelson. Alon, did I pronounce your name right, your last name?
Alon, yep.
Thank you. No, your last name.
Gelser.
Thank
Yep.
you.
My name is Alon Gelser. I live at 2420 South Shepherd Road in Nelson. I've been here 27 years, and 22 years as a Nelson paramedic, and I'll just say personally that CBDs have allowed me to continue in my job. I've spent probably thousands of dollars myself on various treatments for my back in the last year and a half, and CBDs have been important for my capacity to be able to continue lifting Nelson residents. But I'm here to read a statement from Roger Lay, who you may remember as the person who worked for the first 3 years reopening the Civic Movie Theatre. He hoped to attend the meeting tonight, but he's at a family emergency. Like it or not, we've all heard Nelson referred to as the pot centre of Canada. With the pending changes to Canada's cannabis legislation, this reputation, regardless of its validity, provides a unique opportunity for Nelson to once again show innovative leadership while the world looks on. While working to reopen our Civic Theatre, I once said, "We in Nelson never let our size dictate our abilities. We may be a small town, but we have big ideas. We don't let work get in the way of a good time. Half of our businesses close down on a good snow day. We are social entrepreneurs working to live, not living to work. Money is great, but some things, like community, are more important. On the other hand, traditional capitalists are salivating at the profit potential of cannabis. They are not social entrepreneurs. They are only in it for the money. In 2012, our provincial government quietly introduced a new business model, the Community Contribution Corporation, as Canada's first hybrid social enterprise business model. Put simply, a community contribution corporation is essentially 40% for-profit and 60% non-profit. Like a for-profit business, there are no caps on salaries, no limits on generated profits. Unlike the for-profit model, however, at least 60% of business assets must be redistributed to a qualified entity as specified by the Canadian Revenue Agency. Generally, that means charities. In other words, a community contribution corporation is legally obligated to donate 60% of their profits to charitable organizations of their choosing. We call upon Nelson City Council to not ban all cannabis-related businesses, but to investigate the possibility of, and opportunities created by, allowing only community contribution corporations to engage locally in the evolving cannabis market. This would signal publicly that all local cannabis dispensaries, etc., have a legal obligation to conduct business for a specified social purpose and not just for private economic gain. I acknowledge this Council's courage and commitment in opening these discussions to public input and request that Council imagine the enormous economic benefits to our community if 60% of all cannabis-related profits remained in our community through reinvestment and donations to our local charitable organizations. The provincial government has shown leadership in social innovation by introducing the Community Contribution Corporation model, and I believe it offers Nelson a legally recognized opportunity to reshape the cannabis discussion, creating opportunities that would allow our community to finally, truly benefit from an industry that we know so much about. Thanks for your time and consideration. Respectfully, Roger Lay. And I'd like to leave a copy if I could.
Yes, please do. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Our next speaker is Tara Gray from Nelson.
Most everybody has already, my name is Tara Gray. I live at 1542 Knox. I'm borderline city limits. I've always been in Nelson, just recently moved out, so 16 years here. 6 years ago, was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Tried tons and tons of meds, was on 3 different types of prescription meds, up to 12 pills a day, costing me out of pocket because not all of it was covered by prescriptions, or by medical rather, and I was in a complete fog for a long period of time. Started, as our paramedic says, started exploring many different options. Have been run the gamut of physio. I have steel rods in my spine now. I've done physio, I've done chemicals, I've done massage. Massage and chiro are less affordable than marijuana. I found the cannabinoids, particularly the tinctures and the oils, not the smoking of it, but the tinctures, the oils, and the edibles are extremely beneficial for helping with the pain, with the sleep, with the chronic pain that haunts you all day long that makes it unable to do other things. It helps with mood stabilization, where chemicals don't always, and they have many more side effects than the cannabinoids do. My main purpose in coming was not to say yes or no to pot, but to look at the actual availability of it, because the federal ruling that was put out earlier this year gave us free access to it, and it made it illegal and unlawful for any government body to prevent a medical user from getting access to the marijuana. And unfortunately, if you go through the MMAR or whatever it's called now, and the LPs, there's not enough to meet the needs of the people just in Nelson for that matter. There's not enough to meet the medical needs if we had to go through the mail and get it the way it's all supposed to be done. So the fact that dispensaries have come in, now because I have a legitimate job, I have jobs where I have to face the public and be bonded and not be illegal. So I can't go and buy it off the black market. I don't want to go find somebody in an alley and have to get my weed, and I can't always get it through the mail. So the fact that the dispensaries have opened up and allowed me to go in, a normal person, technically, and look at the different things that they have available. They're highly educated. I have learned way more than I ever knew before about what it is good for, what it isn't good for. What I thought was what I was supposed to be doing is not. So I've been educated as well as licensed. And the dispensaries are the ones that are helping me find a much safer path. I'm not smoking it. I'm not, it's a much safer way for me to have it and be around my children, to continue to have a job and work with the public. And if you do this, it is too broad, and it takes away all the ability to meet the needs of the medical users in town. It is much too broad, and it does need to be re-looked at. And I think a partnership with the invested stakeholders is the best way to go. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Mr. Tom Clegg from Nelson.
I'm Tom Clegg, 306 Carbonate Street in Nelson, and I apologize for my public speaking skills. First, I didn't write this part down because I hoped I wouldn't need to say it, but please don't pass laws that you don't intend to enforce. We're asked here tonight to answer a few different questions. They've been presented as should we do action A for purpose B, but action A doesn't serve purpose B, so rather than try to sort that out, I'm just going to address the actions and purposes separately. First, should we clarify the position we already take in our bylaws concerning laws in other jurisdictions? Yes, absolutely. I want our bylaws to be very clear. 2, should we strengthen the position we already take in our bylaws concerning laws in other jurisdictions? Should we say illegal things are illegal in more ways? No, absolutely not. Federal and provincial laws already have a justice system that's perfectly capable of handling their own laws. They decide whether their laws have been broken, and they decide what to do about it. I propose we clarify our position by saying something like this. A City of Nelson business license does not serve to exempt anyone from any laws. And we probably don't even need a bylaw for that because it's already true. You just print it on the business license letterhead to clarify. 3, should we use our zoning bylaw to ban marijuana dispensaries? No. No argument has been offered to explain why the entire City of Nelson in particular is a bad choice of location for doing marijuana operations. And that's the purpose of zoning bylaws, to put various land uses in the right locations. So for the example at hand, a marijuana dispensary, and I apologize for using the term marijuana, I'm also ignorant, is merely a pharmacy that sells very few products. Nelson has pharmacies in various places, and it's fine. A dispensary might also be similar to a liquor store. Nelson has liquor stores in various places, and that's also fine. Liquor stores and pharmacies are both classified as retail stores, and that's all we have needed to say about them in the zoning bylaw. Maybe you're worried that we should have laws about pot being sold next door to schools. I'm glad that we as individuals are thinking about stuff like that, but it just isn't Nelson's job to figure that stuff out. We trust our provincial and federal governments to make restrictive enough laws about tobacco, liquor, and pharmaceutical painkillers to keep them away from the kids. We should trust them to make our marijuana laws restrictive enough too. So no, we don't need to abuse our zoning bylaw by saying that according to our city plan, the way we've laid things out here, the best location in our city for any activity that touches marijuana is nowhere. We're halfway there. Should we limit the number of dispensaries to 7?
Mr. Clegg, it's fine. I'm not going to stop you. I'm just going to let you know that you're at about 3 minutes. So if you can finish up in about another minute, that'd be good. Thank you.
Should we limit the number of dispensaries to 7 or whatever the current number is? No. No justification has been offered for this. But if we are going to limit the number to 7, let's just do that. Make a bylaw that says only 7 at a time. Don't create a special grandfather category for these specific businesses in these specific locations. And choose a number. You didn't ask, but I want to address anyway. Should we try to get between doctors and patients? As a community, should we have our own special blacklist of medicines that shouldn't be produced or sold in our town? A system totally separate from all of the existing federal and provincial laws that regulate medical practice and distribution of medicine? No. You also forgot to ask in so many words, but in a way this is a fundamental question. Should Nelson try to be less tolerant of marijuana than the rest of BC? No. Nelson has defined itself as a friendly, tolerant place. Some of us moved here because of that. It's working really well. Let's keep doing that. So to sum up, do not amend the zoning as proposed, and do not expect federal and provincial governments to make marijuana too legal for Nelson to handle. Thank you.
Mr. Philip McMillan from Nelson.
Hi, I'm Philip McMillan, and I am the head of the Nelson Cannabis Compassion Club for the last 17 years. I'm here to speak for the membership of the Compassion Club, which at present is about 1,000 people. We do not want this bylaw. As you have heard, the broadness of it is, in my opinion, rather unconstitutional. When we were hearing about why this bylaw was being made, there was mention about jumping the gun. Well, I can tell you right now that 17 years ago, we started the Nelson Cannabis Compassion Club not to jump the gun, but to change the laws and to help people. Why did the Compassion Club start? When the Holy Smoke was below the Express in the alleyway there, they didn't sell weed until they were in the house at the end of Baker Street. So they had 80-year-olds coming into the into the Holy Smoke and asking for medical cannabis because they had tried everything else. And we would have to send them to the bus stop. So we started the club so that we wouldn't have to send our elders to the bus stop. You know, I've spent the last 17 years fighting an unconstitutional federal law. And I can tell you right now that I'm more than willing to fight an unconstitutional bylaw. I would take this all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada for my membership. You're going to hear what I have to say over and over again tonight. But there are two things that I really want you guys to keep in mind. The people that this bylaw will affect. You know, I have 1,000 members who have 1,000 spouses. And these are not 20-year-olds. These are people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s. I have a member in his 90s. These people have spouses, children, grandchildren. This is going to affect a lot of people. So I want you to keep in mind the people that this bylaw is going to affect. And the last thing that I could please ask you to do is to take what you think you know about cannabis and put it to the side. Redo your research. If you don't believe that you could be fooled by the propaganda, that scientists and doctors can't be fooled by the propaganda, I recommend that you watch the CNN special Weeds, hosted by Dr. Sanjay Gupta, where he used to be a proponent until somebody challenged him to look at the facts about cannabis. And at the end of that show, he apologized to the cannabis community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snowy. Our next speaker is Lee Harold from Nelson.
Hello, Council. My name is Kaylee Harold. I live on Robson Street here in Nelson, BC. I'm also the manager of one of the cannabis storefronts on Baker Street, the Nelson Patorium, and the chairwoman of our local Kootenay Region chapter of Women Grow, which is a cannabis advocacy group. So I am here to say that I disagree with the proposed bylaw and amendments for the reasons that any potential outcome of this amendment seems non-beneficial to everybody. It seems premature, and the arguments for dispensaries in this case are endless, and the arguments against them seem to be pretty minimal at this point. Some of the individuals that have spoken tonight are cannabis patients and consumers. And the products that they're talking about, these CBDs, these non-psychoactive capsules and tinctures and topicals and alternatives to smoking, these are products that you can't access on the street, and in a lot of cases through Health Canada licensed producers. Licensed producers also can't provide the quantity of products that are required for some of these patients. And they can't provide it in a time-efficient manner as well, because it's all sent via mail. You also do not get the consultation service that you do receive whenever you come into one of these storefronts, when you can talk to a professional about dosaging, how to administer these products, how they should be handled, how they should be contained, and how your regime can also be altered based on your specific ailment. That's a service, again, that is not provided by Health Canada. So this is where dispensaries are so beneficial to so many people. We currently serve over 1,000 patients, and we've only been open since May of this year. That's 10% of our population, I believe. What we're doing is we're creating access in a form of harm reduction, because again, as some of the people who spoke before me have said, if it weren't for us being here, where are these people to go to get their medicine? Some of them can access it through Health Canada, but some of them can't. Some of them are forced to go to the streets if they can't come to a dispensary to get their medicine. As well, this the economy surrounding this industry it's incredible. We're providing jobs. There are 6 dispensaries that are currently operating in this city. They're operating well. We're operating successfully. We employ people full-time, part-time. We're purchasing our products from local farmers, local producers and manufacturers as well. We're stimulating our local economy. What we're doing is all very good. We're also standardizing the industry because this isn't regulated. We're all operating unregulated, so we have to create our own regulations. So us, for example, as our store, we've decided to take on standardized testing. We send all of our products away for further testing at a laboratory so that we know the exact dosaging and any residual contents of the products. So we're creating a form of harm reduction. We're creating jobs. We're creating business. We're bringing in tourism even. People come to Nelson for many beautiful reasons, but a lot of them even come here for the pot because we have an awesome pot culture. BC Bud is world-renowned, and a lot of that is being produced right here in the Kootenays in our backyard. It's bringing in incredible, incredible economy. Passing this bylaw seems, or continuing on with this amendment, you are continuing to criminalize anyone who's working in this industry. You are saying that everyone in this room basically is a criminal by prohibiting any cannabis operations within the city. So why jump the gun? Why make such a premature decision about something that in 6 months' times it could be completely legalized anyways? I just feel that it's useless and it's pointless and it doesn't seem necessary. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sarah. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind, we have one more speaker on the list, but I'm thinking that there may be others of you that wish to speak, or if not, that's fine too. But if you wouldn't mind, I would like to take a brief recess to recognize the young gentleman who's come to tonight's meeting. So we'll just pause briefly, and if I could invite Fraser Packham in, that would be wonderful.
Are we allowed to clap? Or?
Yes. During recess, you may clap. Yes. Hi, Fraser. Please come forward. Say some words about you, and then I'm going to give you an award, all right? Please step forward. And you can face everybody. I bet you didn't think there'd be so many people. They're all here just for you. All right, this is Fraser Packham. He's 11 years old and is a member of the War Amps Child Amputee Champ Program and has gone over and beyond to volunteer his time to spread important messages in our community. Being born a left-arm amputee hasn't stopped Fraser from living a full and active life. He enjoys many sporting activities such as playing soccer and skiing. Good for you. His determination and zest for life is an inspiration to all. For the past 6 years, Fraser has joined the War Amps Play Safe float in the Peach Festival Parade in Penticton, acting as a safety ambassador and encouraging kids to spot the danger before they play. Fraser is well qualified to do so, as he has met children who have lost limbs in accidents that could have been prevented. Fraser is also a strong advocate of the War Amps Operation Legacy. He helps pass the Remembrance Day message to the younger generation by laying a wreath every year at the local Remembrance Day ceremony and by donating documentaries from the War Amps Military Heritage Series to local schools and libraries. Fraser is an excellent example of the War Amps philosophy, amputees helping amputees, and has made a positive impact in our community. We're really proud of you, Fraser. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And we really Thank you. All right, thank you everyone for that. All right, everyone, if I could get your attention back, that would be great. I have one more speaker on my list, and it's Bonnie Baker from Nelson. Bonnie, could you step forward, please?
Thank you, Council, for listening to all of us. I am also speaking against this, and frankly, I'm not sure if this is out of order, but I am stunned that this has come from this Nelson City Council at this time in history. The notion that, from what I understand,
Sorry, folks, we have the lights are on timer, so we have to turn them on. Sorry about that.
Okay, I've spoken in the dark before. I have gone to Women Grow because I have high blood pressure and have problems sleeping, and because I like to encourage the notion that women can be part of this new industry and won't be left out of it. And I appreciate so much the care that has been given to me. These dispensaries have learned themselves how to do what they're doing, because there's nowhere else for them to learn of what they're doing and what they're doing. Anyway, what I have gotten from these dispensaries has been excellent. Like the Buddha butter is great for my arthritis. I've had various and other tinctures and things to help me sleep, which sometimes works. And there's no repercussions. There's no this lovely little plant that grows. Wherever it grows, we're getting organic products. We have people who are really seriously caring about the medical needs of the seniors in this city, and this is so unnecessary. It's a backward step, I think. And one of the presenters did talk about a different model that the city could use in the interim, and I seriously hope that the city will take this back and consider that alternative model that is legal in this province, and that will help us on the way to what's coming next, and not penalize people, as was done in the past, for doing something that's really helping a lot of the citizens of Nelson. Thank you.
Ms. Baker. That is the last of, on the list at this time, and I'm going to invite council now to ask questions of staff, and I will call for more speakers once we've had a chance to ask a few questions, or should I call for them now, do you think? Oh, okay, and the way it's written here, it's a bit, okay. I will, all right. But is everybody, it's really warm in this room, so if it's all right, we're gonna take maybe a 2-minute break so we can turn on the air conditioner and cool the room off a bit, and then we'll come back with more speakers. And Colin, could I get you to, if there's anybody else that wishes to speak, could I get you to get your name on the paper here? And I will resume in a couple of minutes here. It's just that the air conditioning makes it difficult for people to hear, so we'll cool the room off a bit.
And then the guy
Thank you, everyone. If you come back, we'll start up again. Thanks. Oh, Janice, oh, sorry. Janice, sorry. 2 more minutes. One of our counselors had to step out just for a sec. Carry on. Sorry about
You're important.
Yeah, do you want to speak?
All right, everyone, thanks for your patience. Let's resume. I'll just wait for Mr. McClure to come back.
Anybody else?
Thank you. All right. Thanks for that. Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Smith.
Just checking the mic, we're good? Okay. So as you know, my name is Michael Smith. I live on Perrier Road in Nelson. To be precise, my doctorate is in traditional Chinese medicine, just so we're all clear on that. Interestingly enough, Chinese medicine's had recorded use of every aspect and part of that plant for 4,800 years. So I'm comfortable saying I think it's a good medicine. As a patient who suffers from 4 complex chronic autoimmune diseases, I'm a big fan because I can actually afford to live. To try and live my life on pharmaceuticals is untenable for me, even as a clinician. It's cheaper for me to live with pot than to pay for all the pharmaceuticals I would need if I could not access cannabis. As a clinician, and sorry to the background here, smoking cannabis is a waste of cannabis in the sense of medical benefit. It's really, really great because it has a short-acting response. You dose, response, you feel good, which is great, but smoking it is not the ideal way to use any kind of medication. Obviously, you're inhaling something at 400 degrees. If you guys decide to knock out the whole dispensary thing, which is clearly the pointy end of this bylaw if you decide to go ahead with it, you're removing the access of every patient in this community as well as many other people outside of this community who receive their medicine through the mail, right? Which will probably still happen, but you're basically interfering with that. As a clinician, I cannot legally prescribe cannabis probably for the next year or 2. But when my patients come to me and say, I want to use medical cannabis, what's the best way to go? It's unlawful for me to not answer them. It may not be legal for me to prescribe it, but it's unlawful for me to not offer them due advice with respect to a medicine that I'm trained in that's been around for 4,800 years. Well, it's been around since we needed rope. It is a profoundly beneficial thing for me to be able to sit down with a patient, and in my clinic I focus primarily on things like I have, complex chronic autoimmune disease, the really messy stuff, not fun, chronic pain. For me to be able to go to a patient and say, I would like you to get this tincture, or this strain, or this specific alkaloid, in this many milligrams per milliliter of this product per kilogram of your body weight, is the equivalent of me practicing pharmaceutical medicine. I'm just using a plant. Without dispensaries, there's no way I can do that. Okay, well, I guess you can go get your ACNPR trying to learn to build a grow up in your basement. I hope you don't burn down your house. Go Justin Trudeau for a bad decision. We're making it harder for people to get the most precisely active alkaloids by doing what we're doing. If you go ahead with this, you're doing the same thing. We keep stepping backwards with a very, very important opportunity for all patients in this country. Please do not do that, please. Thank you very much.
Dr. Smith. Our next speaker is Brian Rocks. And Brian, if you could step forward and say where you're from.
I'm from Nelson. I live on Ward Street. I've had issues since the day I was born with health. I've had to get stomach operation the day I was born, and I still have the surgery mark on my stomach from it. And since 6, I've had issues with my stomach, and I've had x-rays. They haven't been able to find what's wrong. And for over 15 years, I've suffered migraines. I got sleep apnea, and the migraines, I've taken extra strength Tylenol, I took extra strength aspirin, and they don't do nothing. I've got needles, and all they've done was make it worse. And weed helps numb the pain. And I have back issues because of my posture, and I've gotten Botox shots in my back, and they don't do nothing. Weed helps. And with my sleep apnea, I'm not allowed to take sleeping pills because that can stop me from breathing. The weed's the only thing that's helped me. And if that goes, then I'd have to go to the streets. In the streets, you never know what the weed is with. These days you get weed laced with fentanyl. And I don't know, but if it wasn't for the Compassion Club, I'm on a fixed income. I'm on disability, so I can't afford to spend spend a lot of money on weed. And on the Compassion Club, they don't charge too much. They're there to help people out. And I have motor skill issues, so I can't roll up my weed, and other dispensaries in town have helped me roll up my weed that's not even from their dispensaries. And I don't know what I'd do if they were all red zoned. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Rocks. If I could have Mr. Mark Lefebvre.
Hi.
And where are you from?
I'm from Nelson, living here. Everybody knows that tobacco smoke causes cancer, right? Everybody knows that here? Yeah, we can buy that in a lot of places. And alcohol, known to cause 7 types of cancer. And does everybody know that too? So cannabis, known to cure cancer. Harvard study, 2013. Google that when you get home. Did you guys know that? Cannabis cures cancer. Does everybody know that? Yeah. That should be shouted from the rooftops. This should be a mecca for cancer healing, like Nelson. So I suggest you check Google out. Harvard study, 2013. Cannabis cures cancer. Get your priorities straight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. Could I have Mr. Evan Hauser? And Mr. Hauser, where are you from?
I'm from Nelson, BC. So I'm a pretty recent addition to the area. I guess I've only been living here for about 5 months. It's really interesting for me to see everybody coming together and making choices. I do want to chime in and speak my piece. I work at an addictions treatment clinic out in White Rock, British Columbia. We treat opiate addicts. So we do work with a plant medicine called Ibogaine, and that a lot of the addiction issues that I think people get to with opiate drugs could potentially be, I guess, you could bypass those addiction issues with opiate drugs and other drugs if people had more ready access to alternative treatments for pain management. So this is something I've seen often, where people are trying to get off of these opiate drugs, and with the fentanyl crisis now and all this other stuff that's been going on, beginning a lot of press coverage, and the government has, I guess, commercials about how to try and get people to reconsider opiate drugs and fentanyl and all these other things. So then I think it just makes sense to give people an alternative, right? So that I don't have to see people 5 years down the road with opiate addictions from pain meds and hydromorphone and heroin and all these other nasty things. You should give people an alternative to live a better life, you know? And I think it starts with decisions like this. I understand as well from a position of a little bit of experience. I was a nightclub owner in Saskatchewan, so I know what it takes for bylaws and things to be passed in an area to make sure that you don't have a bar on every street corner. You don't have kids when they walk to school, you know, or walk home after school that are going by places that you wouldn't, you know, as somebody who wants to raise a family here someday, have to sit your kids by every day, right? That makes sense for us to have rules and everything for that. So now I think there's, you know, you got to find a balancing point, and you got to find some things that make sense. But ixnaying that business, with some of these ones as well, I would consider them model businesses for this industry that's just growing and in its infancy right now. And I would just say that yeah, some experience there is important. Seeing what these places are about, I think, is important when you consider where they should be. But there definitely does need to be some thought and consideration put into where they exist, because I plan to have a family here someday. I think this is a great place for kids and families. So there does need to be a balance, but people need access to alternative treatments that are not addictive, that are not morphine or opiate drugs, because I don't want to have to see these people in 5 years or 10 years down the road. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hauser. The last speaker on my list is Mr. Howie Ross.
I live in Nelson, in Fairview. I too am so opposed to this council and this mayor and this city staff in bringing this up at this point. It seems so counterintuitive when you've got a federal law that's knocking on our door. It's right around the corner. It just seems ridiculous. Like, why would we do this now? And I would like to see this city council, who we voted in because we voted other ones out. And a few years ago, I don't remember when it was, but some of you were on council when Councilor McDonald, proposed that we embrace cannabis. Do you remember that? 5, 6 years ago, I can't remember when that was. And it was voted. It was a 4-3 vote. It passed. Then John Dooley, who you notice is not in this room now, came in and threw a fit and got it reversed. So we voted this council in for change, for progressive change, not for the same old, same old. And everybody here, they spoke really well on need, and you know, we have a dispensary. Most of our patients or customers, whatever you want to call them, are 50, 60, 70, 80. We have an 85-year-old couple that comes walking in, and they know what they want, they know what they need. And some of you, you may know that I do not smoke pot, and I haven't since 1972, but I always knew that if I ever needed it as a medicine, I would. And I still will when I need that, and I hope you will have that opportunity if you ever need it. I hope you don't need it. I hope you never have anything wrong with you, but if you do, I hope you have the opportunity. Now, if you were to go and have to buy it through the mail or through a registered place, you don't get like, I forget the woman back there, Kelsey? Kaylee, thank you. Well, she was saying, you know, you get consulting when you come into these places. If you buy it online, you get squat. And if you're going to go to the pharmacy, unless they get big education, now I'm the least knowledgeable in my dispensary, and everybody knows that, and I'm totally upfront about that. I don't know. I can't recommend anything for if you need something for sleep or for pain or for fibromyalgia or rheumatoid arthritis. I'm not the one, but we have staff, and I'm sure the other dispensaries, from everything I hear, has really good staff where they could recommend that kind of thing. So I think, you know, there was, people were talking about, you know, going for option 2 which was to not pass it, and option 3, which was to rewrite it. I'm saying option 2 only. I'm not interested in having you rewrite this. I'm interested in having you forget about this thing, let the feds come out with what they do, and then we go from there. There's no point in doing this now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone, and I'll now turn back to council. And council, this is your opportunity to ask some questions of staff. So I know that everybody's been writing notes, and do you have anything? Does anyone have anything they would like to ask? I think, well, I wrote down a few things for clarification. So my question to staff is, one of the questions from the floor is, why can't we do, or why aren't we doing what other communities did, like Vancouver, Kimberley, those communities? Why aren't we doing that? Or why is that not being recommended? So could I get staff to answer that?
I guess the biggest reason to wait for federal and provincial is we don't know what they will do. So they could limit, as I said before, they could limit the number that are in the community. They could limit where they can be located. They could put in regulations around who could own one of these businesses. They could do a number of things. So we could put some regulation in place, but that could all be overridden by the feds or provincial. Remember, local governments are the lowest on the totem pole, so our regulations are superseded by the federal and provincial. So as an example, I heard liquors allowed, pharmacies are allowed, those are regulated by provincial and federal authorities. So councils do not have to regulate them because they are regulated by higher authorities. They have a liquor inspector. Their responsibility is to attend bars and other places that sell alcohol. We have a liquor inspector in Nelson that gives council a certain comfort that that person is doing their jobs to regulate that industry. The challenge that council is sitting in right now is those regulations are in the works and they will come into place, and hopefully they will accommodate kind of 90% of this. As an example, I heard one of the speakers speak to, they shouldn't be close to where young folks hang out. So right now, you could have a dispensary beside Pixie Candies.
That's okay.
So again, you want to hear from the community what they think is acceptable. Some may think that's fine, and some people may say that's not fine. And the feds may, like I say, they may regulate where that can be. So that's, unfortunately, council's in that place. The feds have identified that they will legalize marijuana, which is, again, recreational, which is different than medicinal. Right now, the feds have said, medicinal, you can purchase from these licensed operators, or you're allowed to either grow your own or have someone else grow for you. That's how we assured access to medical marijuana. That's the federal regulation. So that's the challenge that, unfortunately, we're just in this gray area. And all the zoning bylaw is giving councils the opportunity, when they know those other regulations, that you can regulate where you need to, not where you don't need to.
Thank you. If council has no further questions, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is to call for any further speakers. So I'm going to call 3 times, and if there's anyone else, please step forward, sir. And if you could state your name and where you're from.
My name is Rod Sturtevant. I'm a 37-year resident of Nelson.
Thank you.
I only have 2 questions. At the beginning of the meeting, it was noted that 7 letters were received, 6 were in opposition. I wonder if we could have a show of hands in this group as to who is opposed to your bylaw And who is in favor of it?
Mr. Sturtevant, I think it's pretty clear. I don't think
Then
that
that's fine.
yeah, I don't think that we have all of the communities represented here, of course, but yes, I think your question is pretty evident.
Okay. And number two, did staff come up with this, or did you as a council come up with this bylaw?
When we are considering bylaws, we are taking the advice of the legal community as well, and I think council has been to numerous workshops and educational sessions over the last couple of years, and we are educated by folks that are looking at what's going on in the rest of the province and the country. So
That didn't answer my question.
Did
I
staff
said,
come up?
did staff come up with it, or did you as a council come up with it?
Well, the direction was from council, just like most bylaws that come to council. They set priorities of what they want to see come to council, and it's staff's job to actually write the bylaws.
And that was a unanimous feeling of council.
I think that what I can say to you is that as this, we have been waiting, well, everybody's been reading the papers, so Mr. Sturtevant, as this has unfolded, we had hoped that the federal government would be more clear in their direction as well. And what we are faced with is managing things in our own community, and we're doing the best we can until the federal government comes forward. So this bylaw is a proposed interim measure to wait and see what happens with the federal government, because ultimately local governments have no jurisdiction over this.
Doesn't say interim. I just hope that you listened to the speakers that spoke this evening.
Thank you. Are there any, I'm going to call 3 times now. Are there any further speakers? Step forward.
Sorry, in my passion, I forgot 2 points that I wanted you guys to know. One, you can come into my Compassion Club and look at my nonprofit. I'm incorporated. I have a business license from the province as a nonprofit organization since March of 2000. The paper reported that there were 9 dispensaries in town. That is not true. There were 7. One is closed. The one that was in Wayne Stetsky's office there has closed down. So through market forces, one is already closed, and we're down to 6. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. All right, are there any?
I also forgot to say one quick. I think it's really important to stop using the word marijuana, that not a single person in this room uses the word marijuana. It's a racist epithet against Mexicans, and I thought Nelson was more progressive. To use the word marijuana is very, very embarrassing. Nobody except for law enforcement uses that word, and thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any further speakers?
Okay, so mine's really brief. I have been through a number of votes in this town, and I really hope that this council does not hide behind or say that there's a silent majority that doesn't agree with the majority that's here now, and just, you know, hang out with a certain group and say that that's where you're getting your information from. These are the people that care enough to come out. Maybe some people couldn't because they're not mobile or whatever reason, but I don't want this council to say anything about silent majority. Thank you.
I don't think you'll hear that, Mr. Ross.
Great.
All right. So
I just heard one last thing, only because you just said interim, that this was an interim measure. I don't see that in the language anywhere. So, you know, what do we have to go on that this is interim?
That's a very good question. I'm going to let Ms. Long explain to you. One of the things that is extremely difficult when we're in these gray areas is when the social fabric of a country or a community is shifting. It's difficult when the rest it takes time to change laws. So what we're waiting on is the federal government. So in between, I'm going to restate what I said previously. Local government has no jurisdiction over this substance, over cannabis. But the only tools that we have in our bucket are zoning bylaws. And it is up to us to use the tools that are in our bucket to prepare. So Ms. Long is our corporate manager and can explain a little better about some of the, she just returned from some courses, so go ahead.
I'll do the best I can. So the big concern that is here now is what's called existing non-conforming. So if at the time when a zoning bylaw goes into place, if an entity, a building, a use exists in a zone that is legal, then it gets to remain as a non-conforming, an existing non-conforming use when you change a bylaw, when you change a zoning bylaw. Okay? So if we don't know what the regulations are at this point in time from the federal government, what's going to be permitted as Mr. Cormack indicated. So the most protection that we have at this time is to not permit the zoning permit the use in any zone, so that once the federal government legalizes, it now becomes a legal conforming. So if we don't change the bylaw before, then those businesses that exist once the federal legislation comes into place, they have existing non-conforming. So council's ability to regulate where businesses, et cetera, exist is based on zoning. So once the regulations are in place, you can certainly expect that a zoning bylaw will be back once we know what the rules of engagement are basically, to then determine where they should exist. But the greatest protection that we have right now to avoid existing non-conforming is to put this into place at this time.
So I'm not going to, I've kind of broken the rules of public hearing at this time. And it's so that, I know that people want more information, but what I would encourage you to do is to stay for the council meeting and you'll hear debate. So I won't engage in conversation with you right at this time. I think we've given you the information that we have at hand. But if there are any further speakers, please step forward. New speakers, thank you.
I had just hoped someone else would raise this so I wouldn't have to
Could
speak.
you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Jennifer Colfard. I live up on Trevor Street here in Nelson. I'd just like to encourage council, it does seem that the purpose for crafting this bylaw was to try and make sure that these businesses cause no harm in our community and that they're all operating in a respectable fashion. And I would encourage council when debating this to try and consult with the police officers in our community and request of them information about any harm that has been reported done by these businesses, about any complaints. You may begin to see what type of things that we do on a day-to-day basis when you realize that there aren't a lot of complaints, there's not a lot of disruption, and our members are generally very law-abiding, good people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Tim McDaniel. I've been a resident of Nelson for a fair little while. I was a commercial landlord, and I originally rented a space to the Compassion Club against the advice of the existing mayor at the time, who was a friend. But there was no law against Compassion Clubs and the sales through that medium of the hemp products. And I'm a firm believer is if there's a law, enforce the law. If you don't enforce the law, that leads to the availability of corruption. So for quite a while now, the city of Nelson has tacitly allowed these compassion clubs, whether nonprofit societies or for-profit societies, and basically by turning a blind eye, you have allowed these operations to happen. Now, when you turn around and say, well, gee, we're going to make this illegal, well, not for those to operate. We're going to make it illegal for them to be here and here and here. So now what does that do? That gives you an opportunity for corruption of the system by saying tacitly, oh, well, we're not going to check you out, but you, we don't like. You know, this whole thing of saying, okay, we got all these guys operating, so now we're going to change the rules. Where's the grandfathering clause in all this? It doesn't exist. You've been allowing these things to happen, and now you're going to turn around and say, well, gee, we fucked up. Sorry about that. But we're going to turf you out.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask three, you have a question for staff?
One more.
I have one more, all right, a new speaker. Your name and where you live?
My name is Logan Rankeeler, and I live on 724 Victoria Street. I've been a long-time activist and advocate for democracy. If it's not painfully clear what the general community wants you to do with this thing, then put it towards a vote. Let us decide. Let us. Seriously, if you really have some doubt that the greater community is not represented here, then let us have a vote.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Daly, you have a question to staff?
Well, I guess my question to staff is, and I know we've had discussions in our direction, and looking at this zoning and this bylaw that's coming before us and what we've done in the past, I hear a lot from the public that there's a concern that we're going to act differently than we have in the past and close dispensaries. Is that the intention of this zoning bylaw?
No, that's as our corporate officer stated, this is to allow council the time, when they know what the federal regulations are, and provincial, there'll be provincial regulations, that will give you time to determine how to regulate this industry based on knowing what the rules to gain from those two levels of government are. Very similar to, as I said, what liquor sales in the community are, pharmaceutical sales, any of those other, all those other industries are regulated. And council makes their regulations based on that. If, for example, if liquor stores, you could have 500 of them in the community, you probably would regulate differently than owning it. There's only so many licenses that are allowed for liquor stores. That's all this is doing. It's up to council. You know, as a staff, when someone comes in and wanted to start one of these businesses, it's our obligation to say that they do not conform with our business licensing. You could be fined, you could be shut down. We'd say the same for zoning, and it's up to the individual to determine whether they want to take that risk of that happening, whether council chooses to enforce this. Clearly on the business licensing side of it, which is in place now, council has chosen to look at this from a health and safety perspective, and as long as they're not feeling that's being compromised, they have been tolerant of medical marijuana dispensaries in the community.
So if I understand correctly, if this is passed, this zone, we do the zoning, so there's nowhere in the city that is zoned to have dispensaries. If we don't pass this, then when the federal government passes the law and the dispensaries that are in place would be sheltered under a pre-existing condition, and the city wouldn't be able to regulate where they are.
May or may not, depending on what the regulations that the feds and the province bring in. They may say you can only be in a pharmacy. So if that was the case, then clearly the existing ones would not comply and they would have to shut down. There is risk, though, if I think it's highly unlikely they're going to allow kind of mom and pop operations of whether it's dispensaries or retail sales of marijuana or cannabis. But again, council doesn't know that. That's up to the federal the government. Right now, I think to be clear, they are illegal. That's the federal law. That's, council does not determine. It's arguable.
All right, are there any further speakers? I'd like to say. Please state your name, where you live.
My name is Kamara Casson, and I live at 1222 Selby Street, Nelson. And a very wise person once said, you don't have to know what you're doing to lead. What you have to do is follow what the successful people are already doing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I suggest you read the Vancouver bylaw, because I've read it cover to cover, and they have, excuse me, laid it out in a way that they've created rules for dispensaries to follow, and they get them to pay a fee and have a business license. And they are operating knowing that when the new regulations come in, everything could change. But that's not now, you know? So when that changes, then it happens. If we have to shut down, we shut down. But to take away access from people who really need it to substances and medicines that they can't get from anywhere else, and even the legal producers, is just wrong. It's just wrong. For instance, my brother has a brain injury. I take care of him. He's at home, and he uses medical cannabis every day. And if he doesn't have it, his symptoms are intolerable. And I know you've heard from everyone in the room, or many people in the room, who are proponents of medical marijuana. And I just encourage you to look at what the successful people are already doing, and don't say, well, what if, or maybe this, maybe that. Go with what is in the heart of the community now. And that's all I have to say.
Are there any further speakers? Are there any further speakers? Are there any further speakers? Thanks, everyone. I now declare this public hearing closed. At this point in time, council will take a brief recess. It's been a long session, and then we will come back and open the public meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
That's why I'm staying here, so he's tempted.
No, sir.
My instructions about
Let's focus.
6 hours to go, Bob. Are you following me?
Should cut this off at 8 o'clock and start again on Wednesday morning. That's serious. No, but I mean the council meeting.
Oh, the council meeting should probably be cut in half.
Thank you.
Get to the bylaw, this bylaw, and then you can move adjournment and I'll second it. That's on there.
Yeah, but where? It's probably about
It's on the list under the regular meeting.
90 pages down.
I told Michael he can't talk to anybody about this till after we do the
Yeah, he's out
bylaw.
there chatting with everybody.
Maybe
Go and
he's not.
remind him again.
Well, it's not my job to police him.
Colin and Valerie's here too.
Where's Valerie? Go tell Valerie.
Where's the bylaw?
Yeah, so that's where we're at. I can
Where is it? Give a shit because she's voting. It's right there. It's the very first one.
You mean the very first?
Well, it's after.
Oh, marijuana off close. NA.
What we need.
What?
We need quitting time. We need the time that says the council meeting ends at 10 o'clock, no matter what.
9 o'clock.
Possibly can. Where the hell is everybody?
But anyway, I know what you're saying.
So Janice, I got your email. I guess I'll have to have Friday budget meetings. They have to be on Fridays.
Well, you know what? It's 3 Fridays out of the whole year, and I take about 35 unpaid days of leave from work. I think you could maybe give it 3
I
days.
could maybe. I hate Friday. The whole time I work, at least the last dozen years.
Yeah, you can skip Rotary once in a while.
Well,
You can miss Rotary.
I got every second Friday off, and then I had 17 surplus days that I would use.
well, you know what? When we can have lunch, you know what? Just tell them on those Fridays we want to have lunch at Rotary. So why don't we just
I
have
will
the
go
Rotary
to
lunch?
Rotary, yeah.
Yeah, so let's just tell Colin so that they're not bringing in this lunch for the 3 of us. And we can all go to
There were some names there I didn't get the.
right?
I wrote down
Yeah,
all the
I'm good with that.
I wrote them all down as best as I could understand them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Bob kind of.
Yeah, I don't know what he did, but anyways, I mean, if the rest of them want to come, they can. I mean, I could come for lunch there. But I mean, that's what I'm thinking is that we don't need to. Thank you.
Where's my counsel?
I told Michael.
I have.
Yes, especially when you know in your mind.
Valerie's out there too. So
Are they both discussing this?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I just said.
Counsel, can I get you back to the table, please?
I can't get back to my seat.
Did you see Michael's son? Are you going to the hat on? Is that your son?
I'm officially opening the meeting pretty darn quick here.
I'm not sure I have the right guy.
I just need to get to the right agenda.
I don't know where he went.
Oh, that's
Oh
not
yeah, with the gray sweatshirt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular meeting of Nelson City Council.
Speaker's not on.
Councillor Adams.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of Nelson City Council on November 7th, 2016. I will begin the meeting formally again with the Aboriginal acknowledgement that the City of Nelson acknowledges all Aboriginal peoples in whose traditional territories we stand. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our council, are there any late items? Hearing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. Could I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Purcell, seconded by Councillor Warmington. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Carried. We'll have the next item is the adoption of the minutes of previous meetings. Today we have under consideration the special meeting of June 20th, 2016, the Committee of the Whole meeting, June 20th, 16, special meeting July 4th, 2016, regular meeting July 4th, 2016, special meeting July 18th, 2016, Committee of the Whole meeting, July 18th, 2016. Special meeting, August 8th, 2016. We had a backlog on minutes here, didn't we? Some people must have went on vacation or something in the summer. Special meeting, August 29th, 2016. Special meeting, September 6th, 2016. And the regular meeting of September 6th, 2016. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Adams, seconded by Councillor Purcell. Is there any discussion on these minutes? Everybody read them. It's all in your package. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We already did the recognition of young Fraser Packham, and that was very wonderful to do that. Yeah, go ahead. He's a really special young man. There was one thing that I was going to add as well. I spoke with the president of our local Legion, and he knows Fraser, and he spoke so highly of him. He talked about how he's such an ambassador for our community and such a straightforward young guy, so we're really proud of him. Our first item up on the agenda is the West Kootenay Regional Airport and Nelson Commons housing. We had some recommendations from our Committee of the Whole meeting. And the first recommendation is that staff provide a report to Council on funding options to support the registered navigation procedure analysis at the West Kootenay Regional Airport. Do I have a mover? Councillor Daly, you have?
No, wait. I'm going to have an amendment.
You're going to have, oh, well, then you don't need to propose, you
Okay.
can propose a totally different recommendation should you, this hasn't been seconded.
Rather than a report, given the information we have, I'm okay making a recommendation that we contribute that Nelson contributes $10,000 from the Airport Reserve Fund to the registered navigation procedure analysis that Castlegar's endeavoring to do, which they came and asked for.
Thanks, Councillor Daly. And you'd second that, Councillor Purcell? Further discussion on this?
I'd like to refer it
You'd
back
like
to
to-
staff, please.
All right.
I think I would like to look at having more money, and I perhaps go towards this study. And I didn't realize that it would be coming back for discussion as to a monetary amount at this meeting, and I would like to be able to prepare to have better discussion.
So we have a motion to refer. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sherbo. Is there, so on the motion to refer, is there discussion? Councillor Sherbo.
I would just like to say that, back up Council Morrison on that. We don't know, we may want to give 20,000 or we may want to give 15. So I would like to back her up as we get a report from staff on what they think that our funding could be.
Thanks, Councillor Sherbo. Any further discussion on the motion to refer? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. So the motion is to refer to staff for further information. The second recommendation is that the housing agreement for the third restricted resale unit at Nelson Commons be the same valuation method as the method used for units 1 and 2. Is that?
I think this is already
Well,
subsequent
they
to
were
this.
recommendations only at the Committee of the Whole meeting. We do have to have them, actual motions passed here. They were just recommendations.
I think council
I thought we
had
did.
already made that decision on,
Oh, okay.
right?
I'm sorry, Ms. Long. I think you were away. I think you were away. Yeah, it's okay. Everybody's allowed a summer break. Yeah. And so I think so. The second two motions, we don't need to deal with.
Okay. The next one.
Mr. Cormack, the third one as well.
The third one was actually not in the current, or not in the direction. Basically what council had decided was if there was a sale between when they were looking at the rules or considering changing these, that they would honor that. And then subsequent to that, we had we did have a offer or Nelson Commons had an offer on one of those units, and council agreed to honor that with the 60-year requirement. I believe that was done as part of that in-camera meeting. However, if you want to reaffirm these,
we've already passed it. We can do it again here.
Yeah.
In the official
All right.
open
So
meeting.
the third recommendations is that the term for the housing agreement for the third restricted resale unit at Nelson Commons be for 60 years. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Warmington, seconded by Councillor Adams. Is there further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Oh, opposed? One opposed.
Do we want to do number 2 anyway?
I don't think we need to do
I
that.
think I'm pretty sure we did.
I thought we did it.
Yeah, we did. We did do that.
Now, just to clarify, that was done assuming there was a pending sale, and I think council at the committee of the whole meeting agreed that they would apply that to that third unit anyway. So if your intent is, if this sale falls through, you still will want to uphold the current 25% below market, then yes, I would suggest you pass that as well here.
Pass number 2 as well.
Yeah.
Move.
Second.
Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Sherbo. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have another recommendation from our October 31st special meeting, and we had a request made of council. There's a staff recommendation that staff provide a letter of support to Community Futures Central Kootenai for their application to the BC Rural Dividend Fund for a proof of concept development for the Nelson Innovation Centre. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Purcell, seconded by Councillor Sherbo. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second recommendation is that staff provide a letter of support to the Seniors Economic Development Society for their application to the Grow Local BC grant for the Growing Nelson Gardeners Project. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Sherbo, seconded by Councillor Purcell. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right. We have a request on item number 8. And it's asking council to endorse the Don't Close the Doors campaign. And this was from the Selkirk College Students Union. And the recommendation is that council endorses the Don't Close the Doors campaign in support of adult basic education in British Columbia, and further, that a letter be sent to the Ministry of Advanced Education requesting that funding for adult basic education be restored. Do I have thank you, Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Purcell. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Zoning amendment by marijuana operations bylaw. So, we'll get to that. All right. So we've just had our public hearing, and the bylaw is being brought forward for third time and adoption. So the recommendation is that the zoning amendment marijuana operation bylaw 3353 be read a third time by title only. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams. Discussion. Councillor Sherbo.
Well, I'm opposed to the bylaw, and I think a number of reasons have been raised tonight, and my main reason is that I think it's unnecessary. I think that we should go the way of Vancouver, Victoria, Kamloops, the other cities that have regulated it in the interim until the federal government comes out with their recommendations or their law covering marijuana.
Thank you, Councillor Sherbo. Further discussion? Councillor Adams.
Isn't that what this bylaw is going to do, regulate it? What's it going to do?
Hold it. Well, through the chair, please. Through the chair.
What's it going to do?
To staff.
Sure. The intent of this change to the zoning bylaw will give council the opportunity to do that public consultation, consider how you want to regulate it. Our recommendation is you do that when you have better information from the federal and provincial governments on what regulations they're going to put in place. As they stated, the task force is supposed to come out at the end of November in terms of giving some direction on everything, as they say, everything from where these may be located to just how that system works. So you'll have some better information hopefully the end of November, and the intent of the federal government, or what they're on record for, is that they will introduce the legislation in their spring setting of 2017, and I think they also state it'll take some time for that to actually come into force, but that will give council that time to put in place your regulations. So really this is an interim measure to ensure that council has the opportunity to put in place your regulations based on what the feds in the province are going to do.
You have a follow-up?
Well, just a follow-up. So even if this bylaw passed, we get a third reading and it's now an official bylaw, I understand that the city isn't going to go out and start closing them down tomorrow anyway. We're going to wait until the feds pass their rules and regulations, and then we come back and rework this bylaw. Is that right?
Again,
so nothing's going to change.
That's up to council. There's certainly the direction council has given us at this stage is not to go out and enforce other than, but that's, that will be council opportunity. And yes, even if council sets some regulations, if the province or the feds change those, that takes precedent. So you may regulate a certain way, and you allow them all in your downtown, and the federal regulation says no, they have to be in non-retail areas, for example. Then your zoning bylaw would not fit with the federal regulations. You'd have to redo that bylaw at that time. So really, there's, just to clarify, there's two things. One, putting in place the ability to put in your own zoning when you have the right information to do that. That's different than how you want to enforce it in the interim.
Thank you. Councillor Purcell.
Oh man, I don't even know where to start. One of the things that from the public hearing that we had today that made me think was around the wording around cannabis derivatives or any sort of related substance, and I wonder whether or not we've been specific enough in our wording so that we're not including hemp seeds or things like that the co-op sells, that Still Legal sells. So we may want to be careful around that. I don't know if we want to refer that back to staff to make sure that we're not being too broad.
So we did ask the question of legal. They did recommend keeping it broad. Again, as I said earlier, local bylaw cannot oversee provincial or federal law. So if selling hemp is legal, our bylaw cannot prevent selling hemp.
Oh, okay.
So you don't. So
it just covers the whole.
It covers it broadly. What's legal will be allowed to be legal, just as we talk about. People have the right under the current law to be able to, for medicinal purposes, cultivate or grow with a license. So again, our bylaw cannot override that. So that use is permitted federally. So that would continue. So ours really covers where there's not federal regulation that allows it.
I see.
Councillor Sherbrooke, I have you, but I'm just going to let everyone speak once first. Go ahead, Councillor Warmington.
Well, I'm going to reiterate that I'm uncomfortable passing legislation.
Can you use your mic, Councillor Warmington? Thank you.
I'm uncomfortable passing legislation that we don't intend to enforce. And I think if there's a reason and there's zoning that we're hoping to keep cannabis dispensaries out of, that we should be just discussing that straight up. I don't like this blanket kind of, it gives an impression that we oppose something that's important clearly in our community. So I'm uncomfortable with legislation that really is kind of a blanket legislation that we have no intention of really enforcing at this time.
Can we, is there a reason, a legal reason why it's this broad? It was just stated.
Yeah, it's because of the concern of existing non-conforming. So, and also to ensure that we are in alignment with the provincial and federal regulations when they come out. So if at the time, if an operation, a storefront operation exists in a location at the time that the federal government comes into place, and we do not say in our zoning bylaw that it's not permitted there, then it will be an existing non-conforming use. So you will lose your ability to determine what zones and what locations in the city you want those dispensaries to exist.
So then my question is, why are we not considering where we do or don't want them at this point? This seems to be kind of a backwards way of getting at it. We're kind of reserving the right to make that decision in future, but then why are we not discussing that right now?
Basically, because we don't know what the federal and provincial regulations are.
We don't know what the federal or provincial legislation will be, but we should have an idea of what we want for the community or what the community wants. We could be encouraging discussion on that at this point.
I guess the only reason for that is you could put in a bunch of regulation that will be superseded by the federal or provincial legislation. That's, if that's generally the federal and provincial regulations are in place, and we then zone around that. So as I gave the example, liquor stores, there's only so many liquor licenses that are allowed. So we don't have a regulation that says only so many liquor stores are allowed per block, right? Because that's already controlled federally and provincially.
I still think, though, that if we're wanting to limit it, that we should be discussing that. I just don't see the purpose of a blanket legislation. That's just my perspective. But
Thanks, Councillor Warmington. Councillor Daly.
Is there a motion on the floor, a recommendation on the floor?
The recommendation is for to pass a third reading.
To pass the third reading. So I'm opposed to that. And I've heard a lot tonight, and I'm also giving a lot of thought to the dispensaries that we have in Nelson now and how law-abiding they are, how they, they're not offensive. They're actually pretty invisible in some ways. You have to go and find them. I usually would want to be proactive, and I get the idea that we want to somehow put in a zoning so that we don't have dispensaries where we don't want them when the time comes. And I would usually say let's do that, but I've also heard tonight about from a lot of dispensary owners and people who use this product, and a willingness maybe to be part of that process. And why weren't we consulted other than, a public consultation? And I think we do have to decide in Nelson where we want dispensaries and what we're going to charge for a business license and what we expect from dispensaries. And I think without having given them that direction, they've done pretty well. And so I would like to take the time to consult with them and come up with, and maybe take the time. I think it's an important enough issue that we take the time to consult with them and come up with, hear what they're saying in the industry about how they would zone where they'd put dispensaries, what they think would be proper fees for bylaws and be able to, or for licensing, and what that looks like. And I also, that the one, the idea around a community co-op where the funds, the profits from the business go back to the community. I'd love to explore that a little bit more.
Thanks,
so I'm also saying I think we have the time before we get the federal regulations to do some of that consultation. And I know that's going to cost some money and time to do that, but I think it's worth doing.
Thanks, Councillor Daly. Councillor Purcell, you had another. Councillor Sherbo, I'm going to go around. Would anybody else like to speak for the first time at this point, or should we just continue? Go ahead, Councillor Sherbo, for the second time.
Well, my other point, which I forgot to mention, is I think somebody...
Councillor Sherbo, could you lean closer to your mic because the fans are on and it's hard for people to hear.
The other point is that I think somebody could challenge this bylaw because it's so broad and unspecific that could cost the city money, and I don't know if the city would... If somebody challenged the bylaw legally, I don't know what the city would do, if they would file a countersuit or try and protect the bylaw. So there's that issue. And then I agree with Councillor Daly. I think we need to consult the community. We need more consultation. There's no rush to get this done that I can see. And I doubt if the feds will have the operational at least probably till next summer, if we're lucky, if it happens by then.
Thanks, Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Purcell.
I was also really impressed by the idea of having a working group of stakeholders, law enforcement, medical practitioners, people coming together to decide what's best for our community. And I think, what many proponents of the industry have told us around how the businesses here in town are model examples of this. Of businesses in this vein, that it's a nascent industry, that we have an opportunity to do something really special here in Nelson that works for us. I think we can do that and pass this bylaw at the same time. not like, so passing it doesn't actually mean that the dispensaries are going to be any more illegal than they already are. They
are illegal now.
They're illegal now. And so, and the reason why they haven't been shut down now is because for the most part, the businesses that have been operating here have been model examples of businesses in that vein. And so, we are operating from a community health and standard perspective. And, as long as people aren't selling to minors or engaged in gang activity or, all of those unsavory things, then there's this kind of legal limbo and holding pattern that we're in, that we're paying a lot of attention to, but kind of holding our breaths around, waiting for the federal regulations to be revealed. And so to me, this bylaw just gives us, as a city, the most flexibility possible when those regulations are revealed. And so I really thank everybody who came out today and really heard how important cannabis is to many members of our community. I really heard that, and I'm excited about the idea of Roger Lay's letter around social enterprise and having this kind of task force put together. I don't think that those things necessarily. This bylaw doesn't preclude those things from happening. It just gives us the most flexibility possible. So I'm in favor of it, I think.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Councillor Sherbrooke, I'm just going to see if anyone else wants to speak at this point before I come back to you. Is any other councillor yes?
Well, I would just have to agree with Councillor Purcell that if we pass this bylaw, we're not going to enforce it. All it's doing is saving us in the future for non-conforming, whatever the
existing non-conforming.
The same way we're already not enforcing. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But at least if we pass it, we have that ammunition, or whatever you want to call it, for the future.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Sherbrooke, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Purcell.
Well, I think it's a bad practice. I agree with Councillor Warmington. I think it's a bad practice to pass a bylaw that we're not going to use, or not going to utilize. And I think that it's a negative of process. It's like the cart before the horse. Why don't we wait until we see what the regulations are and then deal with it in that vein? In the meantime, we can have discussions with the community and the police and medical profession and the Chinese medicine and find out what's the best approach for this. And I don't think the dispensaries now, are, as other people have said, are causing any problems. They're not flashy or anything. And I just think it's a waste of time to go ahead and pass a bylaw and bad practice that we're not going to use.
Can I just clarify one thing? So council needs to know we're not just talking about medicinal marijuana. We're talking about recreational marijuana.
I'm aware of that.
So that's, I think I've heard comments limited to medicinal. Your zoning is going to deal with recreational marijuana as well. And you may look at that differently than medicinal marijuana, or you may not. But just to be clear that this is whether people can grow marijuana in the city for production facilities, etc. Right now, they're limited. There's a whole legislative regime around production of marijuana that includes a lot of security in terms of fencing and lighting and security guards, and all those things are.
I'd ask the gallery to please.
Currently on the books for production. So again, it's. Don't narrow it just to medicinal marijuana dispensaries. It's actually
the broader.
Yeah.
Broader. I'm sorry, I lost Councillor Purcell.
Okay. I think. So yeah, right now the dispensaries already are illegal. They could be shut down yesterday or tomorrow, but they aren't because
Hold it, Councillor Sherbrooke.
No, so if you ask yourself, well, why do you need the bylaw then? I would say, if we ran into each other on the street, that, the shops aren't causing a problem right now. Some of them are downright beautiful. The one next to Hall Printing looks like a jewelry store. It's pretty, and that's great, but that doesn't mean that they popped up like mushrooms after the rain in the last year, and it doesn't mean that ones that open up in the next few months or the next year will be the same kind of community assets as the ones that exist now. And so this is just protecting all of us from something that we may not want. So right now, I think many people are okay with what we already have, but we don't know what the future is going to bring. And so this, again, gives the city the most flexibility possible for dealing with the future. And I am certainly committed to the idea of working with proponents and finding out, from them and from other stakeholders like the police, like the medical community, what's best for all of us. I think that it's not as sinister as it sounds. I pick up a lot of anxiety in the room around people losing access to something that they really value and need in their life, and I really don't think that that's what this is about, at least not from my understanding of what we're doing right now.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Councillor Daly?
Yes, thanks. I appreciate Councillor Purcell's comments. I'm also thinking that if we're going to be consulting with the industry and folks, that we'd be in a more conducive, collaborative approach if we haven't decided and then we've got to undecide or to come up with something else, to go from a place of, okay, let's start from ground zero and figure out what's the best way to regulate and zone and create business licenses for these businesses. I think that's a better place to go. And at this point, we're not enforcing closure, or haven't, as other communities have. And that's basically at the whim of this council. And, the balance of this council could change with one person. And so I'm not sure we need to put something in place that could be used or could not be used if we're really serious about engaging with the broader community and seeing what we need to do here with this to go forward.
Councillor Warmington?
Yeah, so I'm basically echoing what you're saying, Councillor Daly, and I really feel like if there's things that we do and don't want, why are we not discussing it right now and learning what the community wants and what we as a community think is the best way forward, instead of having this sort of broad discussion that I think someone said, it creates this impression of further criminalizing people, and I don't like that. And it kind of is, do the ends justify the means? And I just think that we should take the time to have the actual discussion, which is, where do we want them, where don't we want them, and let's have that out on the table rather than having this kind of vague.
Can I just add one
prohibition?
Parallel? I think a parallel that council could consider is your short-term rentals. So you did have a bylaw that said they weren't allowed, and council, that was the starting point, right? So not allowed. Then you started a discussion with community where you thought those were allowed, and we're starting to put, as you know, in short-term rentals, it took from basically May, and it will be till the end of December before we're going to get those regulations in place. So just, it does take some time to do that consultation, to put in proper bylaws, etc. And like I said, in your short-term rental place, you had no, not allowed, and eventually you had that consultation with the industry, with the community, etc. Then you put in some regulations that limited where they would be, how many, a whole bunch of things. So I think it's that's really where staff is coming from, is a similar thing. Create yourself some room to allow yourself to have that conversation. It's not going to change anything, just as short-term rentals. It didn't change anything in the interim. We still did not go out and close down a whole bunch of Airbnbs in the city. Council was tolerant and said, let's take our time and figure out what we're going to do. And then you set business licensing amounts, you set how many, et cetera, et cetera. So just from a staff point of view, I think that's a good parallel from at least where we're coming from staff, why we say put this in place, give yourself the time to do that consultation, and then put in the proper regulations.
I don't know where we...
Hold it. I have Councillor Morrison, and then I'll come back to Councillor Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess one of the things I'd like to say is that just for all the proponents in the room, is that this isn't something that this city council just started talking about last week or last month. We have been discussing the issues around cannabis since we were actually all elected. And I believe Mr. Ross pointed out that several councillors at the table probably had discussion with him about what their feelings were about legalization and use of cannabis and such. So we've been discussing this for a long time, and we have been on the no bylaw, zoning bylaw, and then we've come around and we've passed 2 readings about the zoning bylaw. And I think as we learned and compared and did our homework and went out and talked when we were at UBCMs and AKBLGs, and we talked to other organizations about what they're doing in their places, you know, we've come to try to figure out what works for Nelson. And I just want to make it really clear that this debate is not a commentary on whether cannabis is important or it has medical use. I mean, hemp has been used for years. I think somebody did some bad marketing and we lost hemp as rope, and now we got bad rope. So I think what it does do is that by putting in zoning, I mean, these are the, and I think the staff has been good about trying to explain this, but we have very few rules as a municipal government that we can do in terms of planning or looking at anything that happens in this city. And basically the strongest one is the bylaw. Other than that, as the city manager has referred to several times, is that we can plan whatever we want, and if it violates some provincial or federal law, you know, we just have to throw it out anyways. I think that this zoning bylaw allows us as a city to allow for good planning and future flexibility. I'm looking at it in terms of what it can do in the future when we finally have these federal and provincial rules and regulations. I think most of you know that, and I'll state my bias clearly here, is that I'm not a cannabis user. I'm not particularly in favor of cannabis. There's questions about, I understand, I've read the literature, I've read lots of reports about how good it is, but I can also go to the literature and I can also find, you know, to suit my own personal bias, that maybe it's not that good. And I really, as a healthcare proponent, want to know what the long-term outcome of this is. This zoning bylaw isn't going to help me get that answer. But I think this is a direction for the city to go. Councillor Purcell, you spoke more graciously about this. You get my gold star for the night, but I think that why not form a stakeholders group as we go down this road? Let's pass this zoning. Let's get a group of stakeholders together. We've got lots of the business people in the room. We can get the police, and we can also look at other options going forward. So when we get the regulations, I hope these regulations aren't a disappointment to everybody in the room when they finally come down in the spring.
Thanks, Councillor Morrison. Councillor Purcell.
Oh man, what was I going to say? Yeah, I guess just to, in case it's not clear, the idea behind this bylaw is to not have us be stuck with something we don't want, not necessarily something we already have, which again, we would have shut down if it wasn't working for us. So it's around, you know, having the maximum amount of flexibility and it doesn't at all stand in the way of us consulting with the broader community around what direction to go in. Like, I don't think that's an either or conversation. Like, I liked what Councillor Warmington was saying around, you know, taking the time to figure out what we actually want as a community. I just am not sure that we have that time right now. Like, I mean, certainly not at this meeting, you know, and do we have, so if the feds are rolling out their plan in February, I think is their estimated time, do we have, is that enough time for us to really have a robust community consultation and you know, and understand what we want as a community? I'm not sure that it's enough time. I feel like we could do both.
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Councillor Sherbill, can you lean into your mic a bit, please?
Oh, sorry.
Because we have the fans on.
I consider this bylaw a negative approach. It's not a positive approach. It's not progressive. I don't think, and everything that Councillor Purcell says can happen whether we pass this bylaw or not.
You too.
Well, I don't think that it benefits going into consultation, bringing a negative approach to it. I think it'd be a lot better to have an open discussion with our community, all members of our community, medical, legal, everything, and consult. And as Councillor Warmington says, look at the best places or the places not to have dispensaries and do it in a positive, progressive manner. Thank you.
Any other speakers? No? So I'm going to speak as well, because I think it's important. We have a lot of people here tonight, and I think it's important that people understand where I'm coming from as well as your mayor. I listened really carefully as well tonight, and I really appreciated the people that came out tonight to support your views on the cannabis industry. I also need to tell you that I hear from people who don't support the cannabis industry or who have concerns about the proliferation of shops and perhaps not having the diverse downtown that we currently have. And that is a real fear of some people. They may not have come here tonight to speak, but they do speak with me. And I think they probably speak with other councillors. So it's not that people are necessarily against the cannabis industry. It's that they want to maintain the diversity of our community. So there were a couple of statements that were made that people said there was a statement made that these businesses are currently paying taxes. I don't think so.
Absolutely.
I don't think so. To who?
Federal government.
GST, income tax, wages.
Well, wages. Well, that's not taxes. But anyway, I'm not going to. I won't debate with the audience. But that's not taxes. Dispensaries that are accessing cannabis now. What is happening? I think one of the things that we need to be really clear about is that this is not a shoe store that people are selling, or there are a candy store, or what. This is a product that it will be federally legislated and governed and regulated. And as much as you are frustrated with the unclear nature of what the federal government is doing right now, I think local governments are feeling very much the same. We're not clear on how the product is going to be regulated, and we're not clear on how it's being regulated now. I've received complaints about some of the product that I've heard that's coming into town as well. People talk to me all the time. And I have no opinion about that. I'm not saying that it's I have no way of assessing what is coming into stores and what is being sold. And I have to rely on the word of what the people here tonight told me, where they're accessing their product. So all of that adds to the complexity of this issue. And when we think about our community, and when we think about, how many dispensaries are good? I think at this point in time you can buy off sale, or there's liquor stores. I think there's 4 liquor stores in the community. And we have 7 cannabis dispensaries at this time. So we possibly have, and with a possibility of more coming forward, which may or may not be what the community wants. I really like the idea of having community consultation across the broad community, not with just the people who are part of the industry, but I think because you are becoming a legitimate part of the business community very soon, within the next year or two. Cannabis distributors will be legal and regulated and a real part of the business community, not having to be in the underground. I think that's a good thing. So if the council chooses to move ahead and have a task force or have a public consultation, I would see that as a broad public consultation with the broader business community as well. I think that would be a very good thing. I think that, and we have been talking about this for a long time, and it has been a really difficult issue for this community. It's no secret to anyone that we have a very tolerant community when it comes to the cannabis industry, and people have been very accepting. And I think that I definitely understand that there is expertise in this room that could probably be used by the federal government. But sometimes they say, I've heard that Nelson lives in a bit of a bubble. I don't know if the federal government will consult with us or with any other community or growers that really know what they're doing, but I sure hope they do. And that's what we can advocate for, and you can advocate for as well as this moves forward. I think that's a very good thing to do. In the meantime, we have what we are talking about tonight is a zoning bylaw, so that when the product is legalized, both recreationally and medicinally, we have the ability to design our community. That's the only thing that communities have. We have official community plans. We stipulate where businesses are, where residences are, where schools might be, and it's all about wanting a healthy community, just like everyone here tonight. So although this bylaw in its initial form is clumsy, I am going to vote in favor of it tonight. Well, I know I've disappointed some of you, and that is unfortunate. But I am going to vote in favor, and you needed to hear that. You needed to hear why. That doesn't mean that tomorrow everything in town is going to be turned on its head and places are going to be closed down. But what it does do is help prepare us, and it also levels the playing field for when the product is legalized. It levels the playing field for all business owners. So that is one of the reasons that I am moving forward on this as well. That doesn't preclude us from consulting with community. It doesn't preclude us from exploring the opportunity for community developing a community contribution corporations. That doesn't preclude any of that. So I think it's important that people needed to hear what I thought about this, and those are my comments. So council, we have a couple of ways to go. If council is unsure about this, we could refer it back to staff. We could vote on it. We're at third reading and possible final adoption tonight. Or you could refer back to staff for further work. It's your choice. But at this point in time, we have a recommendation on the floor to pass third reading. So I am going to call the question. Councillor Daly.
Just a point, and that is if we refer it back to staff.
We've already had a public hearing, and we can't hear any more new information.
Right, we'd have to do a new public
We'd
hearing.
have to have another public hearing.
Another public hearing.
Yeah.
And I can make that motion then, or I mean, we already have the.
Yeah, you could.
Let's do that.
You want to refer this back to staff?
Refer it back to staff.
Do I have a seconder to refer? We'll hold it.
I just want to clarify what
I
you would
understand that
refer.
means we're going to have another public consultation.
I'm just trying to understand what you're referring.
But what am I referring? Well, I'm referring it back because I believe it's too broad, that it needs some more input from the folks out there that are running this dispensary. We could do some more consultation and get some more clarity on, what we're going to do with zoning and where it's going to be.
So before
do some of the work that may not be useful if the federal government change it, but I get the cost of that, but I still think that's worthwhile.
Councillor Daly, I'm going to ask for clarification from staff. Is there anything else that you can research or bring back to us that would be that we're within our purview to do as local government?
Well, I think, again, those communities that have put in regulation, they're really regulating as on the books right now, an illegal industry. So council, council can do that and put in regulations around something that should have provincial and federal regulations. But as far as our recommendation on what to do in the interim, you have our recommendation, as Councillor Purcell said, it does not preclude you from having that consultation. This does, council could, if this passes or doesn't pass, you can add that as a resolution to start that consultation.
And I'm not so sure that if we don't pass this now, that would be any different. That we'd still be able to consult, we'd still be able to have time to do that and do that. So that's why I'm saying let's do that and do it right.
All I'm saying is it took us 6 months to go to do short-term rentals. 6 months from now is past February.
So we have a motion from Councillor Daly to refer back to staff and this would be to refine the bylaw and to have further public consultation. Is that what you're looking for at this time?
Well, I think accept the offer of the folks that are running the dispensaries now to
A task force.
have a gathering of them and talk about that zoning and how they see that working and have some input in that. Beyond, what we've heard some things tonight. I didn't hear anyone speak in favor of this, and yet here we have a council that looks like we could put it through anyway, and that doesn't make any sense to me. I think we're somewhere, there's a communication gap here, an information gap, an understanding gap that we need to fill so that we're all on the same page here. It's not about them and us. I don't think we need to have that. When I see that, it means we don't understand enough.
You probably need a seconder now to refer if you're going to debate it.
Councillor Warmington, and so let's open the floor to debate on the motion to refer back to staff. Councillor Purcell.
Is there like a timeline that you're thinking of, Councillor Daly, like to complete some of this?
Well, I heard that you're concerned that it took 6 months with. So can we do this in 2 months? Can we do this in a month or two?
It's I don't know.
I doubt from the planning staff perspective.
Well, I guess here's a question. Did anyone hear things that surprised them tonight from people that spoke? Because I did, and I'm learning all the time about this. And I think even a month or 2 months, we're going to learn some more things. And if we have the folks that are running these dispensaries in to be part of that, we'll have a better understanding of it. And I just don't want to do something pass something on a fear, because I don't know. Let's find out.
Further speakers on the motion for Councillor Morrison.
I guess my concern would be in listening to Councillor Daly, and you guys might want to switch your names back and forth because I need to read who you are.
Oh yeah, it's
anyhow, that have the dispensary owners. Oh, good.
Sorry about that.
You can tell the night is long.
We've been here since 3 p.m., so
I keep hearing you ask about having the dispensary owners in. I would have to say that I've heard from the dispensary owners tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard, I'm looking for where we have other voices, or we have the police, or other stakeholders, or other businesses on Baker Street. You failed to mention any of those. I mean, I heard a strong case here for why having cannabis is a useful product. So I cannot support at this point referral, because referral to have a discussion with the proponents. I mean, really, am I going to have a conversation with the liquor store owners to see if they want to have more liquor stores? I mean, it's a bit biased. Sorry, Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Councillor Purcell. Further comments from Council?
I'm Councillor Morrison, and my name's still the
I'm
right
sorry,
name.
Councillor Morrison. It has been a long day, hasn't it? One moment, Councillor Daly. I want to see if anyone else would like to speak on the motion to refer. Councillor Sherbold.
Well, I'm not real crazy about referral, but I think that it's worth consulting with people, and it doesn't just have to be the owners of the operators of the Compassion or the cannabis stores. We could consult the police. The police could shut these down anytime they wanted. And there's a lot of court action that's happened. That's under the Harper government, they tried to do all kinds of things, and they were turned down by the courts. And so I think this whole issue is up in the air, and if referral is a way to get consultation, I will agree to it.
Councillor Adams.
I don't see any reason to refer it to staff. We passed the bylaw. It's already been said here about 10 times, we're not going to enforce any of it. The medical marijuana shops or cannabis shops will remain open. People who need it can still get it. And all we're doing now is saving ourselves in the future if and when everybody says they're going to do it, the feds. We don't know that yet, to be honest. It may take them 1.5 years to do that. So I just don't see any reason why we should refer it. Let's just pass it, then we have that. It's like in our back pocket, it's safety for us in the future. When the federal government does pass it, then we have a limit on how many shops we can have. There's no existing non-conforming, I think I got that right?
Yep. Existing
Businesses. I don't see why we have to just keep putting this off and putting it off and dumping it all on staff. You heard 6 months. Their job is not getting less and less, it's getting more and more. And I really doubt that they could have it done in the next 3 or 4 months because of Christmas, budget time's on right now. It's just insane. Let's just pass it and sit on it like we're going to do.
I think too that when we talk about timelines, Council, you raise a good point. If the federal government is in fact on track and able to come down with its legislation by February, I think that we would like to be able to meet that and have some control at the local level to meet them at where they stand on this as well. I don't see how this would preclude us from doing any of the other work that we want to do around this. I think that it would help us that's my own opinion. Go ahead, Councillor Purcell.
So I have a question and then maybe...
And this is on the referral? Yeah.
Well, one of them is just a point of clarity, just so that I make sure that I understand. So if, when the federal government comes out with their regulations, they decide that cannabis is kind of like shoes to a certain extent, and you know, as long as it's got less than 12% THC or whatever, then fill your boots, and mom and pop dispensaries are a retail establishment like any other. That would take precedence over whatever bylaw we had. Is that what I understand?
Council controls zoning. So right now, you could say, we don't want shoe stores on Baker Street.
Right.
You can do that through zoning. So this would be the same. So you could, based on what their regulation is, if it's very broad, you might want to narrow where they could be located. If it's very narrow, you can't broaden it. You couldn't make it greater than or less than what they have.
But not more.
You can restrict, but you can't expand.
Right. Okay. And then I guess I would just like to say that my strong preference would have been for maybe for a robust community consultation and then figuring out our zoning around this, but I just don't think that we have the time for it before February. And so this is, again, I think if this bylaw passes, next week will look exactly like last week. We're not going to change if you guys don't change. You know what I mean?
Thanks, Councillor Purcell. Councillor Warmington, I'll come back to you, Councillor Sherrill.
I've been trying to kind of figure out what it is that I can articulate a little more. I guess the thing is that approaching it this way, we're not really supporting this nascent business, these trailblazers. We're kind of leaving them in the lurch and putting them at risk because, frankly, this bylaw kind of hangs over their head and says, whatever we decide in future, we can impose on you. We're saying, okay, you're doing fine and we like what you're doing right now, but there's still this kind of threat. So instead of really supporting this industry that has been at the heart of this community to a certain extent, I hear, haven't been here that long, but, and I guess I would prefer an approach that really does work with the people that are in the industry already and really comes to terms with what it is that we're trying to control. Because again, this blanket thing, it's like, well, what are we trying to stop here? If we don't want more than 8 on Baker Street, then let's just say that and hear back from the community what they think about that. This to me is just, I don't know, I can understand why businesses don't want to see this, you know, they're...
So can I just remind council that we are on the motion to refer and we must just be speaking about referral at this point, please?
I should have been on the bit there. All right, so you're speaking against the motion to refer then?
No, I'm speaking to refer back to staff.
All right, so is anybody else speaking on the motion to refer?
I'm losing it.
On the motion to refer only?
Yes.
I think you already spoke. I think you're saying you want to refer.
I want to refer, but the reason I want to refer is, why did Vancouver regulate it? Why did Victoria regulate it? Why did the other communities that regulated it go that way instead of this way? I don't understand why we decided to go this way. That's all I'm saying. And if referral, we could look into that. Why you know, Vancouver, which is a huge municipality, and Victoria, and the other municipalities that chose to look at it in a different way until the law is clear.
When we began this conversation, Councillor, a year and a half or 2 years ago, the reason we didn't regulate is because anything that we might regulate, the federal government, that's in their purview. So that's one of the main reasons why we didn't just a minute, why we didn't put in place a bunch of regulations that could possibly be meaningless. So for example, there really is no consistent regulation. I believe that to open a pot shop in Vancouver, it costs you $30,000 a year. I think it was in another community, it's $5,600 a year. In some communities, they regulate how many per block. In other communities, they regulate outside the. So each community has kind of taken control of its own destiny in the vacuum, because there's been a huge vacuum while the federal government figures out what it's going to do. In our community, what we thought, because we have small resources, we don't have a lot of staff resources, or this is a small city, it seemed to make sense that we would have common sense and say we would monitor the situation, and hopefully within a reasonable amount of time the federal government would move forward. And we've gone on the best advice that we can get from legal opinion, and especially like lawyers. Legal opinion says that what the other communities have done, really, they've jumped the gun. Now, maybe we should have done that. It sure would have been clearer if we would have said we're going to allow 3 shops. Then we would have had like 10 owners come and say, well, that's not fair either, right? So, and I'm not saying that that's what we discussed. But that is the reason that we did not regulate, because it's not local government's responsibility or purview to do that. And once you regulate, then you're saying, okay, so we're going to regulate all these shops. Who's going to monitor where the product is coming from and how all of that is going? Because you march down that road, then you're hiring more staff to do those kinds of things. And so we thought, excuse me, this is a council meeting. I'm sorry, you can talk with us afterwards, but this is a council debate. So that's why we did that. And perhaps we should have gone, like hindsight's 20/20, they say, but maybe we should have regulated, but that would have meant more resources. As it is, we've spent a tremendous amount of staff time and resources trying to do the right thing as well. So we are on a motion to refer. We're on a motion to refer. And are you ready for the question? On the motion to refer, all in favor? 1, 2, 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're back to the main motion.
West.
On third reading, is there any further discussion on third reading?
This is
hard. It is hard. If something isn't hard, then you're not doing the right thing. If you're doing the right thing, you gotta. This is what we're here to do. We're here to try and figure out the more difficult issues in local government, and this is not an easy one. You're right.
Question.
Go ahead, Councillor Purcell.
A question to staff. Can somebody remind me again what the potential legal, like I know Vancouver in a way is a universe unto itself. It doesn't have the same community charter.
It has its own charter.
It has its own charter, and so in a way it's not always a great example for us to look at. But some of the other municipalities, like I guess Squamish or Kimberley, what kind of legal ramifications there potentially are for licensing and zoning for something that's federally illegal in a smaller municipality?
Well, so because the provincial legislation says that we cannot create bylaws that are contrary to provincial legislation, provincial legislation says that you cannot create laws that are contrary to federal So the legal advice that we have received is to say this is no different than any other situation where we need to have our bylaws in compliance with federal and provincial laws. And so that is the recommendations that have come from lawyers, and as a legislative staff, that is what the legislation says. So that is what has been brought forward to council.
Okay, so there's no, like, in terms of, like, how come Kimberly didn't get that same advice?
Well, I'm sure they did, but there, you know, the council can make a different decision, but it's not the recommendation from the lawyers, and it's not the recommendation as the people that read the statutes can give you, because that is what the statutes say. So it is council's purview if you want to make a different recommendation, but the legal community can't, because that's what the law says. And our role as staff is to provide you the information about what the provincial and federal legislation says, and that is what it says.
And I think someone could, if council passed that type of regulatory scheme without really the authority to do so, they could strike down that bylaw. They could take it to court, and
Why haven't they done
I'm not, that would be up to someone in that community whether they want to take that, but I think they have the right. If we have a bylaw that's not legal, someone, just like we pass any other zoning bylaw that doesn't have, wasn't done properly, someone can take that to court. It depends. It takes someone that wants to do that. If they don't, then you carry on. If they do, then you find out that maybe all those business licensing fees you collected aren't legal to collect. You'd have to return them, for example.
Councillor Daly.
I like what you said about hindsight, and I'm just wondering if next month, if we pass this and we hear from someone that says, hey, we have, this isn't zoned to be here, and I don't like that there, that someone has a business next door to them and they say, I'd like you to enforce this zoning.
Right now, under your business licensing bylaw, they could do the exact
They
same
could do the same thing with business bylaw, but the zoning would be, we would have to enforce that?
No, again, council it's on a complaint basis. You can, it's your discretion at the end of the day. There's no one that can, could they pursue you through the courts?
Judicial review?
Possibly. Again, it would take someone, but you're sitting in I think whether you passed a regulatory scheme that wasn't legal, they'd have that same right as having one that's, that you're not enforcing. So you're in a gray area. That's, unfortunately, you're in this place until the feds and the province figure themselves out. And if, the safe thing is what other communities have done, shut them all down, don't allow them. That's the safest place to be. But this council sees the value of the medicinal dispensaries, has been tolerant. No one has come and asked you to shut them all down. Some have certainly expressed they're not necessarily happy with them, but no one's taken us to court to say, enforce this, etc. So we got about 6 months. It seems like that you're going to have the ability to put in the regulations that you need. That will give you the time to consult. You'll be in a good position at that time. The feds will hopefully have their legislation in pass. Like I said, if they limit the number of licenses that are allowed in a community, you don't have to regulate that. You go, yeah, we're fine with the provincial regulations. If you're happy how far away from schools or whatever they say, you can accept that. So there's a number of things that you may or may not have to do depending on what they do.
I think, too, that when we talk about timelines, I think that's what concerns me, too. I would like our community, it's not just council. This council acts on behalf of community. I want our community to have the broadest possible opportunity to do what we know is best for our own community, and what people, when people come together. And I'm talking about people from all sectors to come together to have that broad conversation. And although it can get pretty raucous at times, I think that we're pretty good at that. And as a council, this council I think, does excellent work with staff in terms of bringing people together to talk about difficult issues. And this issue may not seem difficult to some folks, in the community, and others it really is difficult for them. But I think that we make the best decisions when we come together and speak about it all together. Tonight we had a broad representation from the cannabis community, but I also think we need to hear from other folks as well. And and it's about common sense. It's about balance, and it's about healthy community. And I think that this council has demonstrated a measured approach on this issue and a very common sense approach. And the tool that's at our hand right now in terms of this bylaw is on the best on legal advice that we have, and it poises us for when it truly becomes a legal industry, which is a good thing. So although I'm not really that happy with the wording either. I think it sounds quite negative. I think that in legalese, that's the way things work. It's very clear and precise, and the wording may not always be what people want it to be, but that's the way it's constructed. So I think that for us to refer back to staff for the reasons that are of further community consultation and all of that, I don't think that that's the purpose of this bylaw. This bylaw is to give a broad perspective on the entire community so that we can move forward in a good way when it's legalized. This doesn't preclude us from doing any of the deeper community work that we are wanting to do. And if the federal government moves forward in February, I as mayor feel really strongly that we need to be prepared for that we need to, our community needs to be in a good situation, not just for the industry, but for everybody who lives here as well. And if this is the tool that we have at this time, then that's the one that we should move forward with, and that's why I am voting in favor of this. So, further discussion or any new discussion on this? Yes, Councillor Purcell.
No, Councillor Turbo is ready to go home.
That's okay. Councillor Sherbo had about 5 cracks at this, and you've had about 4. So I think he'll hang in there with you. Well, he's good at it.
I just at the risk of opening another can of worms around this, I guess I'm wondering if anybody around the table or with more experience who was there at the last debate that previous council had around this. I guess what I'm suddenly thinking about is in the future, with whatever regulations come forward, if we have I understand the benefit of passing this bylaw, passing third reading for maximum flexibility for the city. I'm wondering how that will work when it comes time to lift that or change it in terms of divisiveness in our community. It seems to me suddenly at this moment that it's a lot less divisive to not have this zoning bylaw. Like, it seems easier to me to create something from scratch than to lift because they are the same way the room right now is full of people who are cannabis enthusiasts. There is a significant number of people in town who don't feel that way, and they're going to be freaked out when that ban is lifted, depending on what the federal regulations are.
I think the difference there is that when it's legalized, it's a legal business. So whether people are freaking out about it or not,
right,
it becomes a legal entity. And then we work with community to figure out where and how, and that's and yes, there'll probably be sparks flying, and who knows, or maybe not. But I don't want us to be unprepared in February. I don't want us not to have any say with whatever the federal legislation, whatever that comes down. I want our community to have flexibility to respond. Councillor Adams.
Can you please remind me what motion is on the page?
Well, the motion that's on, this is third reading of the bylaw.
Question.
All right, is everyone ready for the question? Are you ready? All right, all in favor? Opposed?
I'd like my vote recorded, please.
Yes, it'll be recorded. The motion passes.
Fourth reading. Adoption.
Fourth reading. And for final adoption, that the zoning amendment marijuana operation bylaw 3353 be finally adopted. All in favor? Opposed? Let's try that again. All.
We did
Need a motion.
first and seconder actually on the fourth reading.
Pardon, I'm sorry.
It's a separate motion for fourth
Separate
reading.
motion.
We need a
Moved. Oh, well,
Second.
for the fourth reading.
fourth reading. Well, how come it's not listed?
Adoption.
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 That's what I said.
We didn't have a first and seconder. We just.
Oh,
called the
I'm
question.
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
A mover and a seconder for adoption,
Yeah.
so it's
Second.
Councillor Adams and Councillor Morrison. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Council, and thanks to everyone here. I don't want people to be distressed. There's not, like as Councillor Purcell said, that nothing dramatic is going to happen on the street tomorrow. It just gives us some flexibility. So thank you all for coming.
It gives you complete veto powers. It gives you.
Yeah, about where places will operate. Yes, you're correct. All right, so the next.
Let's correct a misinterpretation of the facts here. We do pay federal income tax as a company. We do submit payroll taxes, and we do charge GST on all our products as per the federal court decision in 2015. We do contribute to the national economy and to the local economy, so that is absolutely
Megan,
that needs to be recognized.
you need to be here for this planning item?
Thank you.
Can we?
We have to do this one.
Which one?
The housing agreement needs to get through.
All right, we're on the Nelson Commons Housing Agreement Bylaw. There is a recommendation, just a minute, that the Nelson Commons Housing Agreement Bylaw number 3355 2016 be introduced and read a first time and read a second time by title only.
Moved.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Adams. Is there discussion? All in favor? Carried. And the second recommendation that the Nelson Commons Housing Agreement Bylaw number 3355 2016 be read a third time by title only. Do I have a mover? Councillor Morrison, seconded by Councillor Adams. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Inter-community business license bylaw. There's a recommendation that the inter-community business license bylaw number 3356 2016 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. Councillor Daly moved and seconded by Councillor Morrison. Any discussion?
I think we should just
Say what it's about.
Yeah.
So since we have media here. So the history on this is that this inter-community business licensing bylaw will allow especially contractors, people like plumbers and builders who work through different communities, to purchase one business license instead of a business license in each community that they work in. And it is meant to make their lives easier. So this is an agreement that's going to move forward between the communities of Castlegar, Creston, Caslow, Rossland, and Nelson. And we're also in communication with the community of Trail. So we're hopeful that will move forward with Trail as well. So that's what council is supporting here, or hopefully supporting. I don't know. We'll see. That we have a mover and a seconder on that. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And second part of this is that the intercommunity business license bylaw number 3356 2016 be read a third time by title only. Mover, Councillor Daly, seconded by Councillor Warmington. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I just heard positive things about this, how smart it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have an animal control fees bylaw. So we have, staff has put forward a report, and we're looking at online licensing for people's pets, which is a good thing. They won't have to come down to City Hall. And we're also looking at ways that pets can be identified should they be lost to their owners. And this bylaw is also asking or providing the opportunity for people who own cats to have their cats licensed and identified, so that if you lose your cat, that they can be returned.
Sorry, one clarification there. We did originally have the cats on
We
there.
don't have it now?
We don't. We didn't take it out of the report, though. It was a voluntary for the cats, but we realized we had to look at more regulations and animal control to make that happen.
Okay.
So when we look at that more holistically, we'll probably be bringing it back.
Great.
My apologies.
All right. So there's a motion on the floor that the fees and charges amendment, animal control bylaw, amendment bylaw number 3358, 2016 be introduced and read a first time and read a second time by title only. Thank you, Councillor Daly, second by Councillor Sherbo. All in favor?
Hang on.
Okay.
So the change is only that it's going to be online, or there is a fee change as well, the $5 fee change?
There is a fee change as well.
Could I get you to close the door, Councillor Daly? Thank you. The second, so is there further discussion, Councillor Purcell?
So I understand that you can register your animal online instead of having to come down to City Hall, which is an added convenience. Does that mean that the pets don't wear a tag, or like does it get mailed to them? How does that work?
So you're correct, Anna Purcell. So there's a few things that are going on there, and again, in trying to make this sort of into what's available now. We have also searched out those that do this online and on the web base. There's some new companies that even contacted the community recently, but they haven't started with anybody. This is a kind of this DocuPet is, yep. This particular company that we're looking at has a number of communities they already deal with, their experience and that sort of piece, and they do it web-based. And the idea too is that you would have a 12-month license, because some of the things that we had before where you might get it halfway through the year, you only pay half price and that sort of thing. So now you'll just have a rolling 12-month. And should help free up some staff time. But the bigger piece I think that I wanted council to see was the fact that this is a value added. A lot of times we just have licenses for whatever reason, but here you're going to have the benefits of being able to alert if your pet's missing. There's hopefully the opportunity to be able to have kind of like almost like a benefit if you're at the dog store and that sort of thing. So there's some buy-in that goes in from the community as well.
But you get a tag mailed?
The tag will be mailed to you, yes. Sorry, maybe at the end of the story. I just thought there's a few questions. You guys were going so quickly. I just wanted to get some of this stuff out here so that I can help you move along. All right. The other piece, too, is that to be clear on a couple of things that are happening here. The fees and charges is being moved into the fees and charges bylaw. As council has been aware, we've been moving those to that, and that's why you'll notice that there's also the bylaw portions that relate to the actual Animal Control Act as well, of removing them from there. So that's why they're both there.
Yeah, the fees going up?
The fees are going up, yes. Yeah, I think it's $5.
$5, yeah, the fees will be increased $5. I think it's from $25 to $30 per year.
That's correct. And
those are registered.
And my understanding is we do offer seniors discount, do we not?
We did. This would eliminate this seniors discount. Again, too, when you read through it, there wasn't much uptake on the seniors using it anyway. So again, it was all something that was reviewed and looked at.
You gotta get a dog, Bob.
All right, so, council, I'm going to try and keep you focused here. Let's get through this together. Are you ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Secondly, that the fees and charges amendment, animal control amendment bylaw number 3358, 2016 be read a third time by title only. Mover, please. Councillor Daly, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Third, that the Animal Regulation Control Amendment Bylaw number 3357, 2016 be introduced and read a first time and read a second time by title only. Just a minute, didn't we just do that?
Well, then we did 3358.
Thank you very much. Okay, a mover please, Councillor Sherbo, and seconded by Councillor Daly. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor? Carried. And fourth, that the Animal Regulation and Control Amendment Bylaw number 3357, 2016 be read a third time by title only. Councillor Warmington, seconded by Councillor Purcell. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Council. Let's keep moving along here. Hall Street Lane.
Can I make a motion on this one?
Yes?
That we adjourn this section because we need more than, it's already 10 after 9 and I'm damn tired. It's been a long day since 3:30. To Wednesday morning? Because I think this Hall Street Lane is going to be more than.
So you would like to refer this?
I'd like
Counselor,
I'd like to refer the rest of the meeting, but I don't.
Oh,
yeah, refer this one for sure to Wednesday morning, 9 o'clock.
I'd suggest you, if you're gonna refer the rest of the agenda to.
Yeah, the whole agenda.
Refer the rest of the agenda, thank you.
Is there any, but the council calendar?
What we would be doing is we would be adjourning this meeting until 9 a.m.
Okay.
on
Whatever you said.
Wednesday, and then we'll continue it then.
Is there anything of urgency on the rest of our agenda? I don't think there is, but just to staff that we need to deal with so that we can. No. All right. So.
Just mine, I know.
Oh, well, we can do it 9 a.m. on.
I can do it on Wednesday.
Yes, you can. Yeah. All right. So the proposal is that we adjourn the meeting now and we reopen the meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday morning before we do our. We're going to be here anyway to do budget workshop. So Councillor Purcell is seconding and Councillor Adams had moved it. Is there further discussion on adjourning the meeting at this time? All in favor? Opposed? Then, all right, then we're done.
It was
Are we going back in camera? Do we need anything after this?
Other than what,
Oh, unless people want to, that we can do on.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody.
It's all this crap. Is this yours?
got through my stuff. Thank you, Mary.
Because I really don't, like I
Oh,
was moved
thank
by
you.
the people who spoke.
Thank you very much for watching tonight's council meeting, and I wish you a great evening. Take care.
Oh, I want to photobomb you so bad.
Oh.